Good morning. How's everybody?
I'm doing well so far.
Good.
Still early though.
Not too bad. Thanks for asking.
I think spring has sprung.
Hopefully.
Yeah, I think the bad cold weather may be over. Kind of happy about that. My wife wants to see another snow. Something wrong with her. It's not that fun anymore. Oh, me. So,
Good morning.
good morning.
Anybody's brackets busted yet?
Anybody's bracket
Hi.
for March Madness? Did your team win?
Huh?
I talk about like the March Madness and everything.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm choosing the opposite of whatever I chose is what's happening.
Uh-uh.
I chose is not happening. It's a disaster.
That's every year. That is every year. You never know. That's why it's madness.
Yeah, it's fun to watch though. They've been good games.
Isn't that why they
Yeah.
call it madness?
Mhm.
Why?
Because everybody gets all mad because their team don't win. You know, I've come to realize that.
Yeah, that's true.
It seems like to be the next. I don't know anybody out there do fantasy football. I don't, but I know some people in my family do, and boy, they get really competitive.
Oh, yeah.
So kind of reminds me of fantasy football at college. So
No, I love it. I love the excitement. And the upsets and all the fans and the signs, everything. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, everybody has a big time, but watching the games is my wife's the only time she gets excited is because of the excitement of March Madness, and she wants to turn the games on and me to sit and watch it with her. It's brutal. It's just awful.
you not a fan of it, Dr. Lamb?
The play is terrible. It's just awful. College basketball is brutal to watch anymore. It's just awful.
Yeah.
Well,
Good morning.
good morning.
Are you?
Stefan says she'll be a few minutes.
Okay. The shooting is terrible. They have no touch
Right.
because they've all, since they were little kids, they stand to 3-point line and jack them up. They're all arm shooters. So that means they have no touch. They don't know how to elevate and then shoot with their wrists. They all shoot from here. And so anytime they shoot, if they're not facing the basket or if they're moving in any way,
Yeah.
the rims have to be super strong nowadays not to be bent because it's some of the worst shooting I've ever seen. It just clanks. But if you don't shoot with your wrist, that's what you get. So, but watching teams try to shoot, it's just brutally bad. It's just brutally bad. It's either jacking up threes or head down trying to drive, and there's no mid-range game. There's no ball movement. It's just throw it up. And you wonder why the scores are in the 60s because they're just brutally bad. Just brutally bad.
Yeah, I always wondered why, like in professional basketball, they always had like over 100 or close to it. And yeah,
Because they can actually shoot.
Yeah.
They don't really play a lot of defense.
They don't play any defense, but they can actually
College,
shoot.
there's a lot more defense, which keeps the score lower.
Lower. Yeah.
But the defense in college is basically mug the guy with the ball. A lot of body and a lot of hand checks, a lot of body, a lot of moving picks, a lot of just really bad form in basketball. But it's hard to watch. Some teams are better to watch than others that actually can actually play the game and play defense properly with their feet rather than just mug the guy with the ball. some of them can still play, but not a lot of them. And if you allow that style of play, anything can happen. The best teams don't filter to the top that way. It's according to how the game is called rather than the talent and how they can play as a team. It's just Virginia Tech lost yesterday. They had a surprising run through the ACC tournament, but I didn't figure they would get very far with their style of play. They'd all be fouled out in the first half of the first half if they played like they did in the ACC tournament. I knew that wouldn't go, so they bowed out pretty quick. All right, so let's get started this morning. Welcome to 738. We're going to change up a little bit today. We're going to start with our case studies because we've got some folks who've got to go today. So Brenna's group is going to go first, and Harry's group, and so we're going to dive right in this morning. So Brenna, if your group will share the screen, we'll get started.
Thank you, Dr. Lamb. Okay, team, anybody want to share their screen in particular?
I can. And all of a sudden I got a code. I don't know where that came from. My nose is all of a sudden runny. That's crazy. Can you all hear me?
We can.
Yep.
I can hear you just fine. Brenna's voice was very soft though.
Okay. All right. Thank you all so much for your attention. So we did case study 4, giving feedback. My group consists of Heidi, Neely, Brenna, McCormick, myself, and Richard Brown. So a summary of this particular case, a consultant has met with Jasmine, a manager, in order to provide feedback. The consultant separated the feedback data from the respondents into 4 themes: limited access to her input, shared decision-making, humor, and indirect communication. The consultant must give feedback while considering Jasmine's responsiveness. One moment, I'm sorry, you all. I apologize. I just had to get some tissue. Okay, I apologize.
We're at midterms, right?
Thank you for your patience. I appreciate it. All right. All right, so just restating the summary. So a consultant has met with Jasmine, who is a manager, in order to provide feedback. The consultant separated the feedback data from the respondents into 4 themes: limited access to her input, shared decision-making, humor, and indirect communication. The consultant must give feedback while considering Jasmine's responsiveness. So the role play. So each of us within my group had a particular role. Heidi was a consultant, I was Jasmine, Brenna was a note taker, and Richard was a participant. Heidi, as a consultant, her role was to analyze and disseminate the data, maintain the anonymous nature of the respondents, and provide effective feedback based on the results of the survey. Me as Jasmine, I embodied characteristics based on perception indicated within the text. Brenna, she took detailed notes from her observations and gathered qualitative data. And then Richard, who provided observation as well as analysis of the data. So preparing for the meeting, we looked at the particular strengths of this team and Jasmine. So particularly for Jasmine, 3 strengths that we identified included willingness to ask for help, encouraging collective decision-making and collaboration, humor, creating a friendly environment that can be leveraged as a strength with training. So in the past course, we have discussed Thomas Kilman's conflict management or conflict mode instrument. So particularly with this certain instrument, is identifying conflict management styles into 4 different categories. So we have accommodating, avoiding, competing, compromising, and collaboration. When we look at Jasmine, we see tons of potential for the collaborative style of conflict management. The collaboration management style can be identified as assertive and cooperative if used effectively. So we see her having components or having remnants of this conflict management style, which is ideal. Additionally, she uses humor, which is excellent. According to different studies, humor can be used to reduce stress, promote creativity, and also just develop long-term or develop wholesome relationships. So when one uses it correctly, that is. So when considering humor, we should also consider the social dynamics of the group. So that may be ethnicity or gender, but those are factors that need to be considered. Additionally, after looking at an article by Romero and Kerr Thirds, it breaks humor into 4 different categories. We see affiliative humor, self-enhancing, aggressive, and mild aggressive humor. So affiliative humor is ideal. So that's, for instance, in a social context, we may develop certain a rapport with our teammates, and there may be maybe inside jokes or contextual situations that we can recollect based on our experiences. So that is ideal. There's also mild aggressive humor style, which could have some benefits that can especially be used in very tense situations when you're trying to, lighten the room or lighten the mood or atmosphere. So this could be playful in uncomfortable situations. However, even with that particular type of style, you have to have a certain sense of nuance and self-awareness to be able to read the room with that. So those were some strengths we identified.
All right, so now let's talk about how we prepare for this meeting. We want to look at the areas of improvement for Jasmine. And one is, again, being tactful with the humor and the sarcasm, and trying to figure out if it's just a nervousness that she has, that maybe she just doesn't know what to say in the appropriate time to say it. Also, time management. Some of the feedback said that whenever there's she canceled 3 meetings, or she's not around much. So is it because you're not, what are you doing with your time? Access and visibility. Again, as the leader of this team, she's not found. When they need that leadership, or they need to ask a question, she is not there. The confidence, clarity, decisiveness, asking the team members, they want her to be more direct. They were saying, like, when she asked them, well, what do you think we should do? Giving input is one thing, but asking them what they think she should do doesn't seem like it puts her in a good role as the leader making the final decision. It's like she just is unsure. And then also conflict management. When a customer, when a customer may be angry, or it's a difficult situation, Jasmine is nowhere to be found again. So maybe learning how to deal with the conflict. So looking for those ideas. Okay. And also preparation for this meeting. What strategies will we use? What theories are we going to turn to? And so one is just leadership coaching and training. So, looking at making feedback a regular part of this job. a skill, making it a skill where practicing giving and also receiving feedback in a constructive way that's respectful to all parties included. And so again, the time management, conflict management, and resolution skill, that's an important piece to have those resolutions. Emotional intelligence, the soft skills, working to, empathy, listening, those soft skills of when feedback is happening. And then we talked about Jahari's window, using that as a strategy and some of the SWOT strategies. And with Jahari's windows, understanding who you are, but then also how others see you in a professional capacity. And also with the SWOT strategy, as far as the business goes, how it's affecting the business, and if the breakdown in the team communication or the team dynamic is impacting the business in any way. Next slide. So this is how this is how our agenda will look. So just greeting, breaking that ice, asking questions, how are you? Thanking them for that opportunity, and just kind of letting Jasmine know that they appreciate that she reached out for guidance. She reached out to ask how to be a better leader. And so that's just very important in determining what this meeting is about, which goes into the purpose of meeting with the consultant and what will kind of going over the agenda together and trying, because usually with an agenda, Jasmine may be looking at like, where's the bad stuff, or how's this meeting going to end, or what's on here, but just kind of going step by step to let her know what each bullet point is going to talk about. Client focus, what are you hoping to get back from this feedback? And tell her there's an opportunity for her to ask questions, or like tell her what she's hoping to achieve from this meeting or from having this consultant there. Feedback results, what suggestions, and then your recommendation, action plans in place, or tools for her toolbox to get through some of the time management, the conflict management, and then also clarity and closure. And that's where she can ask questions to get better clarity on some of the feedback from the consultant, and then have a plan in place to move forward. Next slide.
So we did take time to go over the discussion questions that were there for us in the case study. And the first one was really asking about Jasmine in our role play. So how did Jasmine respond to the feedback? Did we accomplish what we'd hoped? And how did we set up that meeting successfully? And obviously a way to start and set up a meeting successfully is to have an agenda and to make sure that you have a plan as you are getting started in speaking with your client. In our particular role play, our Jasmine agreed with our positive feedback, but seems confused by the areas for improvement. And that was kind of in line with what the case study told us about Jasmine, that maybe she was going to be a little reluctant to hear some constructive criticism. One thing that we noticed that we did not do that we should have done is have a more structured improvement plan ready for her. Our initial meeting, our initial role play meeting, we kind of went in with the data and all of the things that we learned based on the survey, without very specific suggestions and an action plan set up for her. And that's something that we learned as a group for that feedback meeting. So the next is again Jasmine, and Jasmine said it was difficult to hear some of the feedback and it was surprising. Again, like Heidi mentioned, that Jahari's window idea of being aware of how others perceive you in a role. What are your hidden perceptions that are happening? Jasmine also said that she was open to feedback as long as it didn't suggest that her current leadership style and behaviors were incompetent, which is definitely something as a consultant we have to be ready to address, that maybe not incompetence, but area for growth, and how we can take your strengths and use those to make every area of your leadership style better. And then again, we feel, and Jasmine felt, that there should have been more specific examples with suggestions for improvement for her to use and move forward. And then finally, I took notes on the role play as our Jasmine and consultant were talking. And I do think that during our role play, we stated facts without evaluation of them necessarily. We used that survey and the responses to provide examples to help with some of the clarity for Jasmine. We did begin the meeting with some positives with her strengths and what we saw that was really great. We didn't punish or say, fix this or blah, 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 but instead we need to make sure there's more solution suggestions so she can see that there is a path to growth. We did address only behaviors within the recipient's control, referencing that survey data. And again, I think our lacking part in our feedback discussion was the suggestions to motivate action. So we told her a lot of things that were good and a lot of things that were not good, but didn't necessarily motivate her to change.
When we think about some of the blind spots that we may have had, we identified a few resources that could be useful from our previous learning experiences and identified these tools that could be very useful in helping provide insight for some self-reflection for Jasmine, especially. So it's already been mentioned, the Johari's Windows piece is a really useful tool to help a person identify where their gaps may be and how they understand themselves and how others understand them. But also the SWOT analysis could be a very useful way of understanding how the individual is helping or inhibiting the success of the organization and how we can deliver information back to the person. Of course, no one wants to be told you're trash. So we have to find ways to deliver a message in a way that celebrates both the person's accomplishments and what they bring to the organization, but also ways in which they can improve. We thought about the sandwich approach, which I tend to be a fan of, but we've heard feedback that that's not always the most useful way of delivering feedback, because you give somebody the positives, you follow up with the meat of it all, what needs to be worked on, and then you follow up with positives again, and it could lead somebody to believe, I'm great, I got 2 out of the 3, I'm perfect or near perfect, whereas the SWOT analysis really moves us from this place of saying, here's what's challenging and here's what's good, but also gets us to think about ways we can improve. Next slide, please. Some other new learning that we've had here is, as I just mentioned, SWOT brings out both the good and puts us on a pathway to identify ways to improve. But when we think about strategic planning doesn't just say, here's a problem, go fix it, but identifies the challenge and then helps us think through more actionable steps that we can take. So we encourage this kind of strategic planning approach where we can identify, here's a gap, here's a challenge, and then identify some tools or some tactics to employ that will help get someone to the right place. We want to encourage Jasmine to focus on the themes. In this kind of scenario, when you get negative feedback, it could come across as, well, the person could perceive this feedback as, well, that person must be the problem who said this. The people who contributed to the survey, they don't understand that this, that, or the other. So instead of focusing on the individual, we really want to encourage Jasmine or anyone who's receiving feedback to focus on the themes at large that are occurring, not the individuals who are saying the things. We talked about Johari's Windows, we talked about SWOT analysis. The last piece that we'll offer in terms of understanding or getting feedback is this idea of emotional intelligence, understanding your own emotions and understanding how you impact how people see you or how you interact with people around you. So we really encourage emotional intelligence 2.0, the text and all the assessments that come along with emotional intelligence 2.0, the textbook, as a tool for Jasmine to kind of help her understand how to relate to people she works with. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier, not just saying, hey, here's the problem, not go fix it by identifying here's the problem. Let's set a goal to improve that problem. Let's follow it up with some actionable items, some tactics or strategies that can really help Jasmine move forward in her work. And next slide. These are our references. And we'll pause here to say, what questions do you have for us?
Okay. All right. Again, we're going to deviate a little bit from our normal. I'm going to go ahead and ask group 2, Harry's group, to present, so we can, and then we'll start my feedback loop. Those of you who have to go, you can pop out when you need to. So Harry's group, you can go ahead and start your presentation.
Perfect. So I will share my screen. Can everyone see the full screen of the PowerPoint?
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Yes.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Awesome. So we also did give them feedback, and this group consists of Ben, Leslie, Sharice, and myself. So we'll get started. So just here's some of our learning objectives that we utilized during our presentation. So we really wanted to work to develop a plan for presenting qualitative feedback to Jasmine. We wanted to conduct a feedback meeting with Jasmine and reflect upon it. So we were all sort of given various roles to do so. Ben served as a consultant. Leslie served as Jasmine in sort of the simulation of providing Jasmine with feedback. Sharice served as the note taker, and I served as the observer. We also wanted to recognize ways to utilize self-assessment tools for growth and professional development. And those are sort of the things you will recognize as we move through our presentation. So just some background information regarding the case study. Jasmine is the leader of 11 customer service specialists. Consultant has agreed to conduct individual interviews with the specialist and provide Jasmine with an anonymous report. The consultant also senses that Jasmine would have a difficult time receiving feedback based on their initial conversation. And so that's just some of the background information that we wanted to provide as we sort of move into this analysis. And just some summary of the feedback. This is information from the specialist. We all know, based on the case study, there were sort of 3 themes of negative feedback provided and just 1 theme of a positive feedback. And so thinking about the negative feedback, team members believe that access to Jasmine is too limited. Jasmine's use of humor and sarcasm hurts team members' feelings. And also team members would like Jasmine to be more direct. But the positive was that team members appreciate being included in decision-making from Jasmine.
Thanks, Harry. And so as we collectively thought about what the central theme or the problem was for this particular situation, we were able to identify that Jasmine was unable to effectively lead her team and receive constructive feedback due to her lack of leadership and emotional intelligence, and the components of the leadership that were not there were, communication, knowing her people in terms of who she managed. And then, the other thing is that leadership requires development of the team. And so that was also lacking because she wasn't helping them to achieve success. Whereas when we looked at the emotional intelligence component, 2 of the key components of emotional intelligence is self-awareness and self-management. And so with her struggling in those areas, that is how we deemed the central problem with evidence that she was struggling to lead her team. When we looked at secondary problems, there were a plethora of things that we kind of looked at. And so
what we arrived at was that Jasmine may not be the appropriate leader for that particular team, or she may not be in the correct position, because we were able to identify that there were more negatives than positives where she was being challenged. You know, we want to certainly evaluate those things in the right place, because potentially we're looking at potential turnover, we're looking at unhealthy work culture. And so because of that, we want to make sure that, for example, that teams are not working in a silo where they are working separately and not collaboratively, and that we minimize the conflict that may potentially be present, be in ensuring that with these problems being identified, knowing that there's no staff development, so resulting in, you know, of course, poor performance. And so in identifying those secondary problems, we also looked at Jasmine's leadership challenges, which we identified as having poor organizational skills, challenges with time management, emotional intelligence, also inappropriate communication with staff as she leaned on humor. However, her humor did not go over well. And also she has some challenges with her judgment as well as interpersonal skills, because she wasn't able to read the room per se and recognize that her humor was falling flat with the recipients, and that also her soft skills weren't present in order for her to, you know, finesse the group to reach the goals that the team was trying to achieve.
When creating an agenda for this meeting that is going to take place with Jasmine, we thought of it in kind of 3 separate sections. What needs to take place before the meeting occurs, actually during the meeting, and then what should take place after the meeting. So before, we really feel like the consultant should take time to become familiar with Jasmine, and this may include researching her job description, her time with the organization, if she has anything prior written about her in a record of some kind. Is she known for being difficult, or is she known for being very easy to work with? We feel like it might be a good idea to ask Jasmine to do a self-assessment of herself that could be compared to the results from the survey at the time of the meeting. We also feel like it's good to prepare ahead and research some ways to help Jasmine grow as a leader. So this could include handouts, it could include dates and times of upcoming professional development activities, even offering or setting up times for her to visit other plants or shadow other leaders. Then during the feedback meeting, we feel like the first thing that needs to happen is we welcome Jasmine. This could include actually going to her office instead of having her come to another location, making sure that it's kind of a casual environment, maybe sitting beside of her instead of across from her, prepping her by saying, you know, some of the comments are going to be positive, some are we're going to have some areas that you could improve. Then praise Jasmine, let her know it's great that she wanted to know more about herself. We're glad that she's inclusive of her team and values their opinion. And then the third thing, you know, dive into the results and kind of go over those with some concrete examples. And we'll have a few slides here in just a minute of those detailed conversations between the consultant and Jasmine. Also give Jasmine time to respond. Also talk about short and long-term goals, maybe giving her an assignment so that when a follow-up meeting is scheduled, maybe between her and her supervisor, that she is able to show that she is willing to change. Then after the meeting, we want to, of course, document the feedback, everything that happened during the meeting, and possibly share this with her supervisor. Number 2, then after the meeting, kind of conduct a follow-up meeting, see if she is taking any of these improvements and acting upon them. And then, you know, in 2 to 3 months, maybe resurvey the staff, see if there's been any change, and see if the consultant maybe need to be contacted again to come back in and do some additional work?
All right, thank you, Leslie. So these next few slides are going to show the conversation as what Leslie mentioned about the consultant and Jasmine's response. So for our first question, the consultant mentioned that Jasmine, your employees were interviewed and provided the following examples of how they feel things are going in your department. We understand that work can be tedious and stressful. We all like to have fun and joke around sometimes. However, while you may like to joke around and be sarcastic at times, some of your team find your comments hurtful.
I was just joking. I don't see what the big deal is. Some people can be so sensitive.
Jasmine, I appreciate your position. However, based on the feedback received, your words are hurtful, and we would recommend that you work on your communication style. So for the second question, the consultant's comments were, as a manager or leader, it is expected that there may be times that you need to be out for meetings, job responsibilities, or personal reasons. However, some of your team members have expressed concern that they would like to see you more present in your job. They look to you for guidance, direction, and help to perform their best on daily tasks.
I thought I was helping them. I guess I can try harder.
So the third one, the consultant said, some of your team mentions your willingness to keep them informed and that you value their opinion when making decisions.
Thank you. I do try to ask around the office to see what others think before making decisions.
Employee buy-in and the ability to gain their trust is important. And then the fourth comment by the consultant was, according to your team members, your strengths lies in including others in making decisions and showing you value their opinions. How can we start transferring that so you can begin making solid and timely decisions that are for the betterment of the organization?
I guess I worry too much about what other people think about me.
Remember, Jasmine, the leader's job is to not please everyone, but to make decisions that grow the organization. Next slide. All right. So in summary, the consultant would summarize the feedback by saying, Jasmine, in closing, I'm sure you would like these comments to be more positive, but the data did not show that at this time. What do you think impacted your performance? Let's discuss some strategies and training opportunities that may help you in your role. So after this feedback meeting, our team looked at 3 theories that could help improve Jasmine's leadership behavior. So the first theory we're going to discuss is Getzel's GUBA model. In this model, it focuses on a social system of an organization. The model explains how behavior can be linked between an individual, or what's called an ideographic or idiographic dimension, and the organizational or nomontic dimension, based on the information that Jasmine received based on her behavior. It links the theory where the organizational dimensions and the individual dimensions does not agree with how Jasmine is performing as a leader. This disconnect between these dimensions is on the organizational dimension. Her role and her position and the expectations of her followers is viewed more negatively, compared to the individual dimensions where Jasmine sees herself as one who believes in fulfilling the expectations of her team members. And the second theory we looked at is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So in this theory, most of us are familiar that it states that there are 4 basic needs in the hierarchy level, where the ultimate goal is to achieve self-actualization at the top of the pyramid. So the needs include physiological, safety, love and belonging, and esteem. When an individual reaches self-actualization, they have the ability to grow themselves in specific behaviors. Some examples of behaviors that may be appropriate for Jasmine based on this theory are knowing how to problem solve, accept facts, and possibly a little creativity thrown in. In Jasmine's case, accepting facts would be the most crucial skill to grow in her leadership, since she does have somewhat of a difficult time accepting negative or constructive criticism. So knowing how to accept these facts would allow her to grow as a leader. And then the third theory is Collins getting the people on the right bus and getting the wrong people off the bus. In other words, it is imperative to place individuals in any organization that may be in the incorrect role, I should say, and put them into an appropriate role that best fits their skills. In Jasmine's case, though, she may not have developed the skills to be a leader. However, there might be a different area in the organization where she could contribute her skills to the organization than in her current role. All right, next slide, please. So, as playing the role in the consultant, I developed 4 perspectives that were important to note in this meeting. The first is all feedback began with a leading comment explaining common acts may see working on a team, or explaining common acts that may see working on a team. The second is the negative feedback was given first to the meeting, so Jasmine could end this meeting on a positive note. The third is feedback was given verbatim from her coworkers to highlight Jasmine's struggles and with the recommendations provided for improvement. And then the fourth is the responses to Jasmine's comments were given along with an explanation why her actions were perceived as negative in the current work environments.
As far as thinking about Jasmine, she may react positively, but it's more than likely she's going to react negatively to a lot of this feedback, and the consultant needs to be prepared for either one. We tried to err on the side of her negativity to see how that would play out, but she has to. It's hard for her to hear this constructive feedback, but that's something that needs to happen, in other words, for progress to continue. Jasmine needs to decide if she enjoys her job or is willing to do her job as suggested and implement these strategies. Otherwise, she's going to need to investigate changing positions or changing careers altogether. And then Jasmine's attitude moving forward and her willingness to retrain, take some of these strategies to heart will really determine her future with the organization.
So after having those, the mock interview, we determined that the best process for making sure we gathered all of the qualitative data was to certainly either audio or videotape or record along with taking notes. But we also identified that, when we're taking notes, there needs to be a strategic method to doing so to make sure that we capture all of the information and ensure that when we are jotting it down, that it is, we're jotting down all the meaningful information that is legible, and that all of the information will kind of account and show evidence to what Jasmine shared with us and what those that we interviewed shared. We wanted to, we recognized that maybe we could color code, group, make sure we identify, tables and charts to make sure that we understand. We want to make sure that we have keywords to kind of cue it. But in terms of the 5 R's for note taking, we talk about record, reduce, recite, reflect, and review. And within those things, making sure that we recite the information to kind of verbalize to make sure that we're illuminating understanding and we're responding, hopefully she will be responding for accuracy. Also just kind of reflecting on what we have jotted down, also taking into account appearances, affect, nonverbal communication, and ensuring that when we transcribe what we wrote, upon checking in against whether we do audio or video recording, that is how we'll ensure that we have captured all the important information. And certainly analyzing our written information and making sure that we just kind of cross-reference to ensure that everything that point was given that we're able to include in the feedback for Jasmine.
And just some perspective of the observer, the consultant created an environment that did not feel punitive and ensured that Jasmine was also provided with positive feedback. And we thought that was super important to ensure, based on our knowledge of knowing that Jasmine could receive feedback negatively, it was very important that, you know, there was an environment that didn't feel punitive. And so that was one of the observations. Consultant did not engage with all of Jasmine's pushback and ensure that they were working to share the feedback provided by the specialist, which I think was super important, to not allow Jasmine's pushback on the feedback to sort of deter the consultant from providing the information verbatim from the specialist. And so that was super important. But also the consultant did not allow opportunity for Jasmine to take a break during her moments of resistance. And so we thought one of the feedback to do better next time will be to, if we notice that Jasmine is beginning to showcase a lot of resistance, maybe saying, all right, let's take 5 really quickly just to gather ourselves, our thoughts, then maybe use the restroom, get some water or something, just to sort of reset the tone and the environment in the room, so that we can continue to get through the feedback. Because the ultimate goal is to ensure that Jasmine knows exactly what the responses and feedback were. And so that was one of the feedback to do better next time.
When we talked about possible solutions, one of the things that our team decided was that if we use a more formalized approach, it might help us in delivering the information to Jasmine, because we knew that her responses might be emotional. And so we looked at the SBI feedback model, where S stands for situation, B is the behavior, and I is for impact. And this is just a tool that will allow for employees and administrators to kind of reflect on situations and look at it from another perspective, because we know that, you know, perception is very tricky. And because we typically see things through the lens of our experiences, you know, that can certainly taint how we interact and how we respond to specific situations. But the tool just kind of outlines a simple structure in terms of the way to give positive feedback that will be effective on the spot. And we just kind of looked at the situation based on the data that we collected, so that the context could be really specific and clear, so that she would be able to identify, you know, the targeted behaviors so that we could do something about it. We looked at the behaviors and identified what those specific things were, you know, being, for example, one of the things is, you know, humor, and how can we leverage that in terms of making it a strength, as humor at times can certainly be viewed as positive. You know, we looked at, you know, the impact, you know, currently right now, the impact was not as positive as Jasmine would like, but the goal was that if Jasmine takes the next steps, that this will lead her impact, or how the impact on the organization will be a more positive experience. So we talked about creating a personal development plan, so that we would have specified goals within timeframes where this particular tool would be used. That's something that we could review and look at constantly to evaluate the growth and how things were going for her individually, making sure that there was a time frame that we did so, looking at professional development of her leadership skills, like we talked about earlier on, certainly, you know, with emotional intelligence, using the book 2.0 to make sure that she utilizes evaluations. We also talked about maybe doing a DISC assessment, because self-awareness is so important, and the feedback that she gets from those evaluations will help her develop, because it will kind of categorize her strengths and the things that she works well for in terms of her tools in her toolbox. Another big thing that we thought about doing certainly was creating effective followers. You know, we had talked about followership being a significant part of when we work in a workplace. And so Kelly, who's one of the pioneers in the whole concept of followership, he indicated that maybe we should have followers that are exemplary, because these are people that are self-managed and they are committed to the organization, but that would too take development. We looked at trying to do identify an internal mentor for her, where she could receive coaching on a regular basis and have a sounding board for strategies and different things. So certainly to give her some guidance. Talked about creating a communication plan so that what she delivers and how she delivers in terms of information related to improvements for the team that will benefit the organization, that everybody knows what to anticipate in terms of how she will do that, whether it will be emails through meetings, because she struggled with, keeping her meeting times and situations. So certainly developing other means of communication so that the information still can be received, and then it would not pigeonhole her into only being able to have meetings. And then lastly, we talked about the use of technology. There's so many tools that she could use to help with her time management and organization, and even conducting and documenting meetings.
And just the summary, as we think about summary conclusions, some lessons learned. Sort of as a consultant, we must take the time to get to know the audience in which we are providing feedback and ensure that we are prepared for resistance. So it is, we believe as the consultant, it is our duty, our job, especially thinking about this situation, to ensure that we know our audience and we're prepared for what we're walking into, especially any resistance. And from this case study, we knew that Jasmine would provide some resistance. Also, remember that it is not the consultant's job to sugarcoat the information, but ensure that an environment is created for Jasmine to receive the feedback as best as possible. However, we know that it is very important and imperative that Jasmine receives the feedback provided by the specialist, or it could lead to the unhealthy work culture causing members of the team to resign or have a decline in morale. We know that as a consultant, we must be able to provide the information provided by the team as verbatim, as clear and as specified as possible, so that we're not either leading Jasmine to conclude a very different result of what the feedback showed, but it is our job as a consultant to ensure that that feedback is provided. We also know that it is not our job to fix the problems, provide the feedback, and if they want to hire the consultant back to come in and do some additional work after some type of survey that the unit provides, the consultant, could definitely do so, but it is definitely not the consultant's job to fix the problem in that meeting, but to really get the information out. That's our references. We will now move for questions.
Okay. So, excellent presentation, the first two. So buckle up. I'll start the rant now. All right. I've got so many things here. When Ben was presenting the Get Sales Google model, the organizational perspective, or nomothetic, is the role that the organization expects you to play, and then the idiographic, what you play, your personality, what you bring, is that's what determines the climate. And climate's part of culture, as we know. So to kind of summarize Get Sales Google, that's one of our 5 big theoreticals, is what the organization needs for you to do every day has to be what you want and can do every day. And so that's pretty much the crux of this case, is that piece right there. What does the organization need for you to do, and what are you willing or able to do? So that's kind of, this is that is the theoretical framework for this one. So let's drill down and start talking about qualitative data gathering. And that's the notion here, is we're going to gather this qualitative data, and then we're going to categorize it, and then we're going to give feedback to the person who asked for it. All right, so here's our first problem, is bias. What is bias in qualitative data? In disciplined inquiry, we collect what's there. That's the notion, is we find what we find. Our first problem that both groups had this morning, which means that you're decent people, and that you're good persons. Your first problem with bias is your automatic assumption is we got to find something positive to say. If there's nothing positive there, you don't find things that aren't there. That's what bias is finding or interpreting things to be with a preconceived notion. Remember, when we talk about qualitative, we find what we find. We don't walk in with, I need to look for this or that. We don't predetermine the categories. I've got to find something in the positive category. If there is something there, it will reveal itself. The preponderance of evidence will be there. We can't walk in saying, boy, that Jasmine, she's a pistol. She's not going to accept this. Well, I better find something good to say. I think Doc even mentioned in the first one, the sandwich method. I've got an article pulled up. I won't bother to do it. Sandwich method is not an effective way to give feedback, by the way, because you hide the message. It's 37% less effective than any other method on the market for giving feedback. We don't do sandwich, not as a consultant. If we're a coach, that's what we do. But we're talking about if we're the leader. So there's three perspectives or possible roles. There's the leadership role. We're working as Jasmine and the organization as her leader, and we're giving her feedback. We're working as a consultant, somebody that she's hired that gives her feedback, or we're working as a coach. The problem that both groups had this morning is because of the biases, but because of that, we unknowingly slipped into a coaching role where we're going to find something positive to say, and we're worried about her feelings. We worry about all those kinds of things. In disciplined inquiry, as a consultant, none of those things are part of the process. I said, you people are too nice. You're too good. You're too quality of people. You're not heartless enough to be consultants. Consultants find what we find. We don't worry if it hurts their feelings or not. We're not worried about how we're going to make them feel better about it or any of those things. We find what we find. We can't let our biases, we can't slip from that role of consultant into coach, thinking about down the road, how we're going to fix this. See, that's why I keep saying every week, we can't get involved in the solutions. We can't get involved in the implementation because that will affect our data collection and our recommendations. It's just natural. If I'm worried about how I'm going to do this, it affects what I want to do or what needs to be done.
And another way I saw bias sneaking in both groups is when we are assigning intention to our observations without truly being informed. We're like maybe in the humor piece where it didn't land well with her people she was supervising. We said, well, maybe she didn't mean it that way. But how do we know that? Or she's not being seen in the office because her schedule's too tight. But how do we know that that's the reason? There's nothing in there. So we really need to use that feedback meeting to continue to collect more information and ask questions. One of my favorite questions to use as a supervisor, a coach, or in a situation like this, is can you help me understand why? Because that puts the onus on the person to fill in those gaps. And then you respond to that information. You don't respond to what you think the person was thinking. You respond to what they were actually thinking. And then you collect more qualitative information during that feedback meeting so that the recommendations, the deliverable you leave, a week after the meeting includes that too. So your interpretations are not biased. It's not what you think the root causes is, it's what they actually are.
Excellent, Dr. Burgess. The Dean of the Graduate School at Gardner-Webb is Dr. Sydney Brown. Sydney is a woman. She, like myself, is a Chapel Hill graduate. Her doctorate is from there. However, we could not be more polar opposites. I was a quantitative person at Chapel Hill. I was a research associate. She is a qualitative. Her dissertation is qualitative. But one of the things that I appreciate about Dr. Brown, even though she's a polar opposite from me, is her first response when working with her, and obviously as a program coordinator, I have to work with her a lot, is help me. She's always help me understand. She doesn't assume. She has me fill in the blank. I appreciate that about her, but she is a qualitative person. Her area is curriculum and instruction. Now, full disclosure, curriculum people and operations people do not mix. That is not the deal. I cannot explain why I have been married to a curriculum person for 37 years. My wife is a curriculum instruction specialist. I cannot explain that. It makes no sense to me either. Because curriculum people and operational people, they are cats and dogs. But what I do appreciate about curriculum people is they don't assign value to things. They ask you, help me to understand. They don't assume things. I like that about curriculum people, about qualitative people. Most curriculum people are qualitative people because they care about outcomes and people. They're a lot more people oriented than operations people like me. That is a character flaw. I'm not saying that's a good thing on my part. That's a character flaw. But the notion of you assigning value to things, and let's circle back to my number 2 point that Dr. Burgess just hit on. Sarcasm is not humor. Let me say that again. Sarcasm is not humor. It is bullying. One of the reasons that stand-up comedians are all up in arms now, and I can't turn anything on without a stand-up comedian in a rant about cancel culture and snowflakes and all that. Well, it's because your material was never humor. It was always bullying, and people found humor in your bullying. It's not that people have changed. People have finally come to the notion that that bullying is not humorous, and sarcasm is not a form of humor in any stretch of the imagination. It is only bullying, period. And so that notion that, well, we can have her work on her, it's not humor. She's not doing it from a good place. The derivation of where does this come from? It comes from anger and the need to humiliate people in a social setting. That's where sarcasm and bullying comes from. And so that's not the same place that humor comes from. In liking people and celebrating folks, that is not the deal. So now, going back to our categories, and I pull this one up and I want to share it with you. Share my screen. Move some stuff out of the way here. All right. Team members appreciate being included in decision making. So here are the things that were said. I like how she always gives us notice of what's happening from the corporate office and asks for our input. I was glad that she asked for volunteers to participate on the system redesign rather than making the decision on her own. All right. Somehow we have mischaracterized that as positive. That is not positive. Neither one of those statements is positive. You know, that notion that we got to find something positive. And so basically we've come up with 4 themes here, and we've determined that one of them is positive, that this one, decision making, is positive. I'm gonna leave it on the screen here. If we go back to, somebody mentioned Collins this morning. If we go back to Collins and we read through that book and we go back and reread that material, and especially the addendum piece, you know, and social science piece, this little manual handbook that kind of goes along with that. And we think about the leadership training that you got in 730 and 732. If you begin to see that and understand what Collins is trying to tell you, neither one of these is a positive statement. Why not? I was glad she asked for volunteers to participate in the system redesign rather than making a decision on her own. Well, Jasmine is the leader of the team. She's supposed to get the best people in the right seats on the bus, right? Isn't that what Collins says? That the leader's role is to get the right people on the bus, but then more importantly, get the right people in the right roles. You would not want me to volunteer to be a jockey. Have you seen me in real life? I'm as big as the horse, but I want to be a jockey. That's been my lifelong dream, is to be a jockey. I want to volunteer to ride the horse.
If you ask for volunteers to serve on a committee like this, the only 2 types of people you're going to get are the people that want to complain about everything and use this as their venue, or the people that absolutely love everything and just want that opportunity to let you know how wonderful everything is. It's like you having a survey with just 2 answers, and then you lose the meat of the people you really need to capture and move and get the opinions of.
Most people who volunteer is, hey, what about me? Don't forget me. But did you think about me? Or people who want the experience, or want to see if they can get ahead, or I want to try to learn that, even if they're coming from a good place. Even if they're coming from a good place, it never ends well.
The other option for that is to have, and I know there's only 11 people on this team, but you could have the 11 people vote to nominate the 2 or 3 people that are going to be on this committee, because that means they have the standing and the respect and the ears of the rest of the people. They might not be the one, they are probably not going to be the ones that would have volunteered themselves, but they're the ones that the group wants to represent them. So whenever you have the opportunity to create a committee like this, especially for something as important as the the system redesign team, you really need the right people on that committee if that plan is going to be worth anything. Yeah.
See, all this is I don't want to make a decision. I mean, that this is abdicating the leadership role. I'll just let people volunteer for this. But what if they're not the right people? What if they're people that other folks don't respect? What if it's people that just had time? Or what if it's people who are just ambitious and want another something put on their resume? And we know they aren't going to show up and actually do any work. They're just resume builders. They belong to every, one of the things that just literally 5 houses back down the street right here that I live on, Stan Ashley lives there. And Stan is Stan's a big beach music person. Carolina Beach Music, he's got a house at, we're here at Lake Norman, but he's got a house at Cherry Grove. Stan's big in the Beach Music Association, and he got me and some of my colleagues at Gardner Webb involved in the Beach Music Scholarship Program. They give scholarships, and going through those resumes. And one of the things, if you've ever seen high school kids' resumes to go to college, they're putting their applications together. You can tell which kids, they belong to 73 different student organizations. They volunteer for everything. But then when you ask them what they did in that organization, they give you the blank stare of the chronically stupid. What do you mean? I joined that group. It looked good on my resume. Well, what work did you do? Did you do any, that particular group, the Key Club, I know that y'all do community service. What community service do you do? You get that. Our society has begun to, and it's not just college kids going to college. Our society has become this, we're resume builders. We're LinkedIn warriors, where we belong to everything. We volunteer for everything in the world that we can volunteer for. But now we don't follow through and do any work. That wasn't the purpose. The purpose was building my resume. So it's the leader's responsibility to make decisions. I need Kelly Burgess on this committee because she's a methodology whiz. I need her. Now, this person over here, they're nice, they're a good person. There's nothing wrong with them as a person, but they don't have the expertise of this person. That's expertise is what I want. And so that notion of this is a positive. No, it's not a positive from a leadership perspective. Jasmine is the leader of the group. What is her role? The role that the organization asked her to play is leader. Make those kinds of decisions. Sorry, Deol, you can't be a jockey. I don't care if it's your lifelong dream. You can't be a jockey. The function there is that you must be small enough that the horse can carry you. We appreciate you wanting to be a jockey. We appreciate that you're willing to help out, but no, you can't do that. The other statement here that we misconstrue as being positive is she always gives us notice of what's happening from corporate office and asks for our input. Oh my God. Oh my God. All right, let me give you a story this morning. When I was a senior high principal in Charlotte, we would have the monthly principals meeting, and there you got to wear your best suit, take a bath, put on your best clothes, because the news media is there for the morning session. The breakout sessions in the afternoon are private, but the news media is there in the morning. And it used to be, it was covered, especially when Murphy was superintendent. It was a media event. And so you show up. And when you went in, this huge auditorium over at the Staff Development Center of the old Cherry School on West Boulevard, you go in over there. They gave you this box, you are this stack when you came in. It had them on tables. And I mean, you needed a boy to carry them. The stack was so big. And so what we would sit there and do in the morning session, because the cameras were all facing the front, the people who were presenting, the superintendent speaking and all that, they weren't facing us. We were sitting in the auditorium. We'd sit there and you'd see the top of our heads because we were sorting through that huge stack of materials. We're making 3 stacks. Very simple. First stack is stuff that's FYI. And it got to be such a common practice that stack was huge. That FYI, just for your information. See, Charlotte Mecklenburg had a policy back in those days is you couldn't just send stuff out to principals. It all had to be vetted and approved. This was the days, prior to all the internet and email. We had email, but it wasn't seen as a way to convey information. And so it was done physically through, but everything had to be vetted through the central office. And so you got it once a month, but most of it, that huge stack, the first stack that was, 90% of it was FYI. And it became such a common practice. They put us our own dumpster right outside the back door. And so when you went to lunch, you just threw that away. You need that stuff. No need to carry it back. The other two stacks that you were going to carry back, the first one was do this, do it now, do it this way. And the other stack was you got to do this, but you get to choose, you and your faculty get to choose how you implement this. That was the thinnest stack. That might be one or two things. Sometimes, some months, none. The other stack that was do it this way, do it now, do it this way. Why would we be that directed as an organization to do this, do it now, do it this way? Think about it for a moment. From a research perspective, Ben's shaking his head up and down. Ben's on the idea here. Fidelity. How do we know if something works is if we go out and employ it in 20 schools. There was 20 high schools at that time. If we go out and employ it in 20 schools, but everybody does it differently, how can we compare the results, or how do we know if we don't implement it reliably, everybody the same, how can we compare the results? How do we know that this program works if we don't have reliability in the implementation? So that's what that do it now, do it this way was about reliability. We can't just have everybody doing their own thing and then in the end try to compare the results to see what the world, we don't know. Well, this group over here, that really worked well for them. Well, they didn't do it the way that we intended. Or it didn't work for them. Why not? Well, they didn't do it the way intended. For reliability purposes, they would say this has to be done this way, this time. This is how this has to be done, because we were doing it in multiple schools. We were going to collect data. We had an R&D department back then. We're going to collect data on these things. Remember, we were just getting into accountability, came in elementaries first, then middles, junior highs, then senior highs. We were just getting to senior high accountability in the mid-90s. We didn't know what worked yet. We were still trying to collect data. We were most concerned about reliability. Do it now, do it this way. You don't have any discretion. We need for you to do it this way. And so the notion here, going back to this statement, I like how she gives us notice of what's happening from the corporate office and asks for our input. How reliable is that going to be? She's not doing you a favor. Again, this is absence of decision making. When corporate sends you things, you do what they ask you to do. There's a reason why they're asking you to do that. It's called reliability. Again, this is the same as the one below it. This is an absence of taking any responsibility or leadership role. So now I ask you, I'm going to ask Dr. Burgess, who again is an expert in this. This is what she does. Dr. Burgess, how much reliability is there in that if we just let people decide what they want to do with what comes down from the central office?
There's no reliability, and it's counterproductive, because when you think about locus of control, what corporate says, and then it goes to someone, and then it goes to Jasmine, and then it goes to her, the people she's supervising. By that time, there's no influence that the people she's supervising have over what corporate does. Where they have influence is sitting on that committee to influence and get that loop of communication going. By asking for the people she's supervising input on corporate decisions, she's just building a toxic, unproductive bitch session. Sorry,
yes.
my language, but that's all it's going to be, because there's nothing that can be done as a result of their feedback at that point in time, at that level.
Yeah. So when I had faculty meetings later that, the next day, those meetings were on Tuesday, I had faculty meetings, and I would put on the agenda, here are the things that we have to do. There's no discussion or debate on these. Now, here's the one thing that we do have some locus control over. We'll talk about that, how you want to do it. But I reserve the right to, put the fatwa on you if you don't pick the right people or do the right thing. I still have to reserve the right to do that. Again, if you pick Deol to be the jockey, I have to say, no, you can't do that. But if it's within reason, but here are the things, do it now. These are the things that we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do them. They are not on a voting agenda. This is for your information. This is what we're going to do. These are not action items that you get to decide whether we're going to do them or not.
I got a question about that, Dr. Lamb. With that statement that was on there, and you're saying it's not, obviously you're saying it's not a positive, but is there any aspect of that? Because I kind of looked at it two different ways. I looked at the communication part, and then I looked at the input as kind of making a muck of it. But do you think there's no positive about her communicating what's coming and planning for that at all?
Nope.
Okay.
No, because it implies false, to Dr. Burgess's point, it implies a false decision-making ability at that level. And there is no locus controls at that level. They can't tell corporate what they will or won't do. And the worst thing that you can do.
There's some value in communicating the parts of what's corporate communication that's impacting them. But as the leader, your job is to kind of filter the communication that's coming down, because they don't need to know what the leader's responsibilities are. The leader just needs to do those. They don't need to worry about that. They have their jobs to do, not theirs plus the leaders plus above. So selectively filtering communication, not taking the whole memo that corporate is sending down and just sending that.
Right.
They don't have the context. They don't have the.
Is that an assumption that that's what's happening though?
That's exactly what's happening.
No clear
Again,
communication from the interview about what was being involved. It was just communication from corporate.
Right.
So if that communication is being filtered and delivered at the right time to the right people, that's one thing. But if it's just wholesale, this is what the corporate newsletter that came to me that I'm giving to you, they might like that because they feel in the loop, but it's not productive.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So basically what's happening here is just getting out of the way of the bull. Don't blame me. This came from corporate. I hold no responsibility on this. I'm just, I'm keeping you informed. Here it is. But that's not the job of the leader. The job of the leader is to filter it and to get folks on board. And again, back to reliability, to do what you need to do. You're a part of a bigger team. If you're in a leadership role, you're a part of that, not a part of the workers. You got to understand which side of the fence you're on here. You can be a conscientious objector and know all that, but then we can't use you. You're not in a leadership role. Leaders don't do that. They understand that they owe their allegiance to the bigger issue, the organization. Again, what you need to do every day or want to do has to be what the organization needs or wants you to do. If not, then we can't use you in the leadership role. That goes back again to Get Cells and Google. Y'all should all look at that model. And so the notion here, I think about Henry McGinnis. Henry was the youngest of the McGinnis brothers. There was 11 of them. They had a roofing company in the thriving metropolis of Sandy Mush, North Carolina, and which is a suburb of Forest City, which is an outer suburb, about halfway between Charlotte and Nashville. But anyway, went to high school with Henry. Henry was the youngest of the McGinnis brothers, and the gene pool was shallow by the time it got to Henry, unfortunately, and so it kind of run out. And so I remember in chem lab one day, Henry was in chemistry. Why, I have no notion. But remember, I went to high school before 94-142. PL, Public Law 94-142. What is Public Law 94-142? That's the law that says that exceptional children get to go to school. So back in my day, not too many exceptional children got to go to school. But the ones that did, there was no special ed classes for them. They just had to put them in the room with everybody else. Well, that's fine, except when you put Henry in the chemistry lab. That might not be a wise leadership decision, but that it happened. But my choice to make. So I remember Henry got his little Bunsen burner out and hooked it up with his little tube, turned the gas on, and then started looking for his light. And so after about, I don't know, 2 or 3 minutes of Henry looking for his lighter, I said, as I stepped back, here, use mine. It didn't burn the whole roof off the building, just about half of it. Took Henry's eyebrows off and his bangs as it went up. But I said, here, use mine, as I stepped back. I think about that often in leadership roles is that too many leaders do that. They say, here, they step back away. They know what's going to happen. They know there's going to be an explosion, and the worker at the end of the line is going to get, is going to get it in the neck from upper leadership. But that kind of serves their purpose as well. When I see things like this, I understand is you're now putting the people that work under you, you're now putting them in harm's way rather than yourself. You're letting them take the fall. You're handing them the ladder for, to start the explosion. And when, you stepped out of the way of the bull, or out of the explosion in this case, the fireball that went up from the Bunsen burner that had been running for a minute or two. And so I think about that. So in total here, I'm watching our time. In total here, I don't see any positive categories. But again, our bias, because this lady hired us, we assume the role of coach. We got to find something positive to say to her. But there is nothing positive in this. That's the catch in this one. There is nothing positive. Humor is, sarcasm is not humor. There's nothing positive. There's no positive feedback here to find. We find it because we're trying to do that sandwich method of trying to find something good to say to wrap it around the bad. It's all bad. Our job as a consultant is to say it's all bad.
And the other thing that I think each group kind of assumes differently, because the document says that Jasmine asked you to help her grow as a leader. We don't know if Jasmine's asking and Jasmine is who is employing us, or if her supervisor directed her to ask us and her supervisor is the one that's employing us. Because I think the second group said that one of the action items would be to discuss with the employer. You can do that if the employer is paying you. If Jasmine's paying you, you wouldn't talk to her employer without Jasmine's permission or give Jasmine the onus to communicate with her employer. But regardless of who's paying you, your job as the feedback as an evaluator should be the same. Because we, like Dr. Lamb was saying, you see what you see, you have to tell them what the data says. So while it's something to consider in who you report out to, the content should be the same.
Yes.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
With evaluating, and I know that we should deliver it the same, just as you said, but can you give us some strategies on how to share that information, simply because I know we talk a lot about culture and culture eating whatever for breakfast or lunch or whatever.
Strategy. Culture
Yeah.
eats strategy for lunch.
So I was just wondering, if you could give us some strategies on how to share the information so that it doesn't affect the culture like in a negative way, the work culture.
The work culture is already negative. We're going to talk about that after we come back from the break. We're going to talk about that. We've got 2 more presentations, but Jasmine is a lawsuit waiting to happen, folks. You talk about toxic culture. So it's already there. I mean, so it would be, to Sharice's point, it would be impossible to give for a culture to already not be damaged by this person. And so again, please remember, you're not her coach, you're her consultant, regardless who's paying for you. You can't be, again, we can't be thinking down the road about things like that when we're in the feedback loop of what data did we find and here it is. Again, because if we're worried about damaging the culture down the road, that will change what we find and how we express it to Jasmine. Again, we can't be thinking about that yet. We're going to talk about that at the end of the day as the leader, what we would do. And that's a great question. That's how we always, if you've watched the other videos, that's how we always, we go to the role of the leader later on and we think about trying not to damage the culture. But right now, when we're in data collection, when our job is consultant, not coach, not leader, there's 3 roles here. When we're in this consultant mode, when that's what the case study is, we can't be worried about, will this damage the culture down the road, or we can't be worried about implementation and outcomes yet. Disciplined inquiry is about we find what we find. We can't be biased by, well, Jasmine, we got to find something positive because we're working for Jasmine. Well, that's coaching. If we're doing that, we're her coach. We're trying to make her feel better. That's not our role here. We'll talk about, but we will get to down the road, what would you do if you were the leader here? We will get to.
Okay.
All right, so it's break time. It's 10:30. We'll be back at 11:15 and we'll have our next presentation.
As far as the
Oh, never mind.
to be continued.
We'll talk on the phone or something. Yeah.
Sounds good. Yeah, just reach out. It's good seeing y'all.
Yeah, all right.
I miss seeing everybody.
Before we go to our next presenter, I'm going to pop quiz Sean and Bertie here. I'm gonna pick on them.
Okay.
All right, Sean.
Having technical difficulties.
All of a sudden, technical difficulties. Sean and Bertie, remembering back to the MELS program and the first evidence that you did, you had to form a PLC. That was your very first activity that you had to do in that program. Why did we have you do that?
Because it's applicable to what we do. Professional learning communities are tied to student achievement as well as teacher performance. So if you meet with them with a purpose and guide them along and center the conversation on student learning and asking those 4 essential questions, like I said, it's just applicable to what we're doing. We're driving in student improvement.
Yeah, it's about what we do. It's about what we do.
I think a big piece for me too was how we had to pull in diverse members that represented each area so that we could get a really full view of what was going on when we looked at data.
There you go.
So we weren't biased. We got a real view of it and everything was just, it was critical to the point. And we were able to, make an improvement plan and action plan moving forward to help combat that.
Yeah, the whole notion with that was to fight bias. We had to, so part of what they had to do was they had to do research on how to set up a PLC. They had to assume a leadership role. Number 1, they had to be the leader. Number 2, they had to research the tenets of it, and they had to, the members mattered because we were trying to eliminate bias. We were collecting data, but we wanted to make sure that we didn't collect it in a biased way so that we could, and we had to focus on the objective of the organization, which is student achievement and teacher improvement. And we had What is a PLC? It's a professional learning community. It is a group that's how we organize work in schools, where we tackle the essential problems of school, which are student achievement and teacher performance. It goes back to the role of the organization, what we're there for. They've heard me say this 1,000 times. What they do at Jones Sausage, they make sausage. What do we do in schools? We teach kids. We expect achievement. That's the goal of the organization. It's not babysitting or warehousing. We expect student achievement. So we organize our work in that way, but we can delude ourselves if we get confirmation bias and get a group that all sit around and go along with what we're doing. But we have to focus on what is the objective of the organization. What is our objective? We can't get together and just be a bitch session or complaining or whining. We have to have an objective. And this circles back to the question that was asked before we went to break from Sharice is, our plan or what we do going forward is based on the objective that we're trying to achieve. Our objective is not to make Jasmine or anybody else feel better about themselves. That hopefully that might be a byproduct of what we do, but we've got to focus on organizational effectiveness. That in the end is what we're doing. So the reason I love this case the most, I think, is because of the irony. What is the irony in this case? What is the overarching irony of this case that just makes me giggle? It tickles me so. What does this 12-member professional learning community, what do they do? What's their job?
We don't know.
Customer service.
Customer service. Now, read through the data. If you were to sit and say, I want to put together 10 or 12 things that you would never do if you were in customer service, it's the data for this case. That's the irony here. That it's just too good. This one makes me
Been there, done that.
Yeah. This is the again, we got to kind of focus here. The whole notion of this group is to provide customer service. The leader of the group should not be within 100 miles of a customer service group at all. And so now that's going to, when we read this and we understand, well, what's their job? Just like PLCs, what's their job? Well, it's to increase student achievement and teacher effectiveness. We have to always understand what the bigger picture is. What are we trying to accomplish here when we put these groups together and see how well they're working or if they're functional or not? So the irony of this case is the leader of a 12-member customer service group has zero dispositional behaviors that relate to customer service. And so us trying to find something is going to be damaging to the organization's objectives. That's our problem here. And we're going to talk about that when we get to the leadership perspective and what we can do and how you would give her feedback from that perspective or what you would do with her. We'll talk about that later, but let's keep in mind when we're gathering data, we have to remember what the objective of the organization is. And it goes back to mission vision. What are we trying to do here? And the irony of this case, which is just too good, is customer service. All right, we're ready for our next presentation. Whose group is up next? Reed's group, I believe, is up next.
All right, let me get this in.
Let me stop my video. It always helps when I stop my video. Screen sharing.
You guys see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, we're on the case study of giving feedback. I'm Sean Perry with Talia Doughton, Reed Rollins, and Beverly Ruffty.
This case offered very little background information about the organization and the individuals employed at the company. What we do know is that Jasmine is the leader of a team and that she asked a consultant to help her grow and develop as a leader. In the initial meeting with the consultant, it appeared that Jasmine would have a difficult time accepting negative feedback from team members and that she might get defensive. The team consists of 11 customer service specialists. Each individual member of the team were interviewed, and the results of the interviews remain anonymous in the data presented to Jasmine. Excuse me. The external consultant conducted the interviews and then summarized the qualitative data into 4 themes with quotes from various team members to illustrate each theme to Jasmine. Next slide, please. In order to understand this case and the background and what's going on, it is important to understand the 4 themes that the consultant summarized the qualitative data into in order to present to Jasmine. The first theme that you see here is that team members believe access to Jasmine is too limited. One of the quotes used to illustrate this theme is, "Whenever I have an angry customer or need Jasmine to make a decision, it seems like I never get a response from her." And the other ones were about meetings, how she had canceled meetings and that she's never around except for staff meetings. The second theme is that team members appreciate being included in decision-making. One team member said, "I like how she gives us notice of what's happening from the corporate office and asks for our input." And another one was appreciative that she asked for volunteers. The third theme is that Jasmine's use of humor and sarcasm hurts team members' feelings. The theme is illustrated in 2 comments from team members. "She's very childish. I don't appreciate being made fun of in front of my peers." And the second comment was, "She has a biting sense of humor that sometimes turns other people off." While the last theme is that team members would like Jasmine to be more direct. One member said, "I like that she involves us, but everything on this team becomes a debate. Sometimes she just needs to make a decision and tell us what to do." And another team member mentioned that she's the leader. She should just tell us what to do. So it's important to note how negative all the comments are and the themes are. And that negativity that the team feels, combined with the fact that Jasmine may not take constructive criticism very well and may instead become defensive, it made for a very interesting case study for us to look at. Next slide, please. Our team came up with 4 learning objectives that center around leadership and giving feedback, since these we feel are key to this case. And since Jasmine had asked for the consultant to help her grow and develop as a leader. For this case, we decided on the following 4 learning objectives: to understand leadership perspectives and how to apply them. Number 2, to recognize the importance of a personal leadership plan, including assessments and evaluations that will be discussed later in our presentation. To recognize the importance of identifying leadership growth opportunities, and to understand the challenge of giving feedback, positive and negative. We feel like these 4 learning objectives summarize and help us to focus on the important parts of this case study. Even though we have limited information, we feel like this will kind of direct us. Next slide, please.
The central problem that we arrived to is leadership. The team members stated that Jasmine was not accessible to them. The workers did not appreciate her sense of humor, and that some wanted her to be more direct by making decisions on her own instead of having a debate for every solution. Given some of the leadership characteristics and personality traits of Jasmine, we talked about utilizing the quality tool plus Delta, which I know with previous feedback, there are no positives, but we went with this to allow us to engage in Jasmine, to be reflective in her process and to work toward a future improvement. The plus Delta model identifies positives that are working first, and we'll continue to build on those successes or strengths. Deltas are opportunities for improvement and are viewed a little more favorably than listing negatives. Deltas are actionable verbs, specific, achievable, measurable, and consistently reviewed and acted upon. In this case, Jasmine includes team members in the decision-making process, which is positive, even though some felt that she does this too often. Therefore, it is something that can be built upon. The delta would be for her to, sorry, I clicked on that, would be to, for her to be engaged, which is a transitive verb, excuse me, to offer, in this case, support with them, with the team members during daily operations. A specific schedule or timeline, maybe a feedback form could be used to measure performance, much like we do with walkthroughs used by administrators in education. The plus delta would be more effective in driving improvement and change the sandwich approach where the negative is placed in between two positives, as this method often buries the lead and does not promote change. The secondary problems, decision-making and assertiveness. Jasmine currently leads with a consultative leadership model where input is collected, considered, and a decision is made. While this can be an effective leadership model, it is better served when major decisions are used are being made that affect the whole group or all that are involved. Another one is emotional intelligence. Her sense of humor is described as biting and childish. They said they had limited access, where Jasmine shows up to team meetings but is not seen throughout the day-to-day operation. And then trust, she cancels or reschedules appointments frequently, and so therefore when you schedule something and say you'll do something, there's no follow through. So that kind of negates the trust there within the organization.
All right, thank you, Sean. Thank you, Beverly. What we're going to look at here, we're going to start out with some key issues and goals. Some of the stuff we've already talked about, but we just wanted to put them up since we are talking about Jasmine. You know, it's a person, and some of the stuff that we want to deal with to try to make her better. Obviously, employees feel Jasmine cannot make decisions. Employees do not trust Jasmine. Jasmine lacks emotional intelligence with a poor sense of humor and timing. Jasmine is not capable of working through the hard facts, and Jasmine is not open to constructive feedback. Next slide, please. All right, possible solutions that we're going to give to Jasmine as we begin to work with her as a person. Back a while back, we did a professional leadership development plan. And that's really where we want to try to focus with Jasmine as she works on getting her feedback and making her better. You know, we looked at this analysis, we got the feedback, and we looked at some peer review, and that's going to be a big cornerstone of a possible solution. We want to set some goals with her, but we want to have objectives with timelines. I think the timelines are going to be very, very important to get her buy-in and see if she is going to be rehabable. We'll do some training, some mentoring, and the last is journaling. Not really sure if Jasmine is able to reflect back on how she's using her time, but I think journaling and actually seeing what she does in a day, how much time she spends on items, is going to give her some direct feedback and help her work through maybe some of the improvements that she can make on with being more accountable. All right, next slide, please. All right, with the meeting agenda, we really, you know, leadership starts with the reflection in the mirror. With Jasmine, we want her to understand who she is, who she wants to be, and how she's going to get there. As a leader, we all understand that we have to have a vision, we have to communicate, we have to have people skills, we have to be competent, be bold, have character, and last but not least, have that servant heart. Jasmine, her performance and her team statements indicate that she has some work to do with regard to leadership skills and practices. The primary goal for Jasmine to rehabilitate herself and develop as a leader, we think, you know, the group must look with the following ideas: emotional intelligence, decision-making, assertiveness, trust, how to have hard conversations, and overall good professional leadership skills. Collectively, at face value, Group 4 truly has questions over Jasmine's suitability as a team leader. We sort of wonder how she sort of got to this point. Group 4 feels Jasmine's area for her greatest growth potential deals with emotional intelligence, EQ. Emotional intelligence is derived from 5 core feelings: happiness, sadness, anger, fear, and shame. And that comes from Bradbury and Greaves. Much of this starts with the ability to understand one's feelings, have empathy for others, and regulating one's emotions. It seems that Jasmine does not have the capacity at this time in her life to empathize with others. Sarcasm, poor humor is not a way to build trust with these employees. EQ has a personal perspective and a social perspective. Personally, it's made up of self-awareness, self-management skills, and then social is the social awareness and relationship management. Again, that comes from Bradbury and Greaves. Group 4 identified she's going to have to work on both. Throughout this whole process, the idea of relationships keeps emerging. Bradbury says if you want people to listen, you have to practice this idea of relationship management, and it appears Jasmine lacks at this time the skills to develop with employee relations. Furthermore, DeBrin identifies that relationship management calls on skills of the leader to resolve disagreements with kindness and humor. And from employment statements, Jasmine is unaware of how to do this. Humor, approachability, and people's orientation of a leader serves as a function to relieve tension, hostility, and reduce boredom. But Jasmine turns people off with this biting sense of humor. Suggestions for Jasmine when we're dealing with her as a person. This deals with her completing this personal leadership development plan for herself. What Group 4 suggestion is for Jasmine to complete a worksheet that defines the following parameters: her leadership strengths, her leadership weaknesses, common feedbacks, leadership developmental needs, and rationale. We will also ask Jasmine to make a map of her plans, her goals, objectives, and resources with timelines. To complete this task, a big portion of this is for Jasmine to understand herself throughout this whole assessment phase. This will constitute her completing the following assessments. So we wanted to give her a list of assessments where she could understand herself: the Blake Mouton Managerial Grid Assessment, the 21 Laws of Leadership Evaluation, an Insecurity Assessment, the Personality Big 5 Inventory, a Leadership Motivational Assessment, an Emotional Intelligence Appraisal, a Trust Audit, and last, a Leadership Battery. Next slide, please. So a big part of employee feedback, a large part of working relationships is employment empowerment. Our group sort of went against the grain, as obviously Dr. Lamb said. There's not a lot of positive, but we felt that Jasmine had a positive in this perspective. DeBrin explains that empowerment is the basic component of shared distributed leadership. Passing on decision-making authority and the responsibilities to subordinates establishes work empowerment. This type of self-determinate helps workers feel they can choose the best method to solve particular problems and create a competitive advantage, again, from DeBrin. Jasmine, I feel, actually excels with this perspective, and her employees have commented that she gives notice from corporate and looks for volunteers to assist in the systems design for the organization. What we wanted to focus on with feedback is we wanted to give feedback with her that first started with leadership, worked to emotional intelligence, and how it all rounded off for trust. Speaking honestly, it must be explained that this is going to be a long road for Jasmine as she rehabilitates her leadership and relationships with her team. The process will take time, and it's important that we specifically talk to Jasmine about these 3 ideas of leadership, emotional intelligence, and trust. These ideas are to assure that she's capable of being a team lead, but not only if she is willing and intentional with her efforts. By being intentional, Jasmine must understand that leadership is the management of the work culture. that Jasmine must recognize and understand emotions, hers and others, and that Jasmine must manage her emotions and clearly define what make up what trust is, and that's competence and character. And it all starts and ends with her as Jasmine. Next slide.
Based off of employee comments and feedback, we created a 30, 60, 90-day plan that maps out leadership goals and strategies for Jasmine to manage and help maximize her work output and productivity within the 90 days. But if she is not successful in doing so, then we suggest that Jasmine be removed as the leader of the organization. For the first 30 days should be about learning. How will Jasmine absorb the information about the organization, the team, and their role? She needs to take this time to understand the team's culture, interact more with the team members, and be seen more or communicate her accessibility to the members. Establish professional, personal connections with the team. Learn how they want to contribute to the organization, create closer relationships, and build trust by learning the team's members' strengths and weaknesses. In month 2, the 60 days, Jasmine's role is to identify key strategic areas where she can contribute to the organization and think about what more leadership can do and to stand out. How can she improve her team's efficiency by updating and introducing new processes, set expectations, take more responsibilities in current initiatives, as well as apply the organizational feedback from the team and that was given to her from the consultant. Based on Jasmine's overall understanding of the organization's vision and how her role impacts the organization, she set goals that increases her efficiency and contribution to the organization. Based on the company's objectives, identify more important strategic initiatives which will help drive the objectives and performance of the organization. This can be something as big as suggesting a different strategy or as small as changing your team's process to make it more efficient. These initiatives are what make Jasmine and the organization stand out more. By month 3, the 90 days, by the end of the 90 days, Jasmine should be exhibiting behaviors to lead by integrating with the organization and the team, becoming a leader who is well trusted and respected. By the end of the 90 days, she should have a firm grasp of her role and the work culture that surrounds her. By this time, be more familiar with her team members, build on what she has learned, and work more towards the execution. People should be comfortable with sharing ideas and experiences with their leader without worrying about being made fun of. Being more involved is critical for Jasmine's success as it allows her to make better and informed decisions by getting more familiar with the company's culture and the people there. That helps to create better working relationships. Next slide, please. The action plan reflects a timeline that we established for Jasmine's personal leadership development plan to be used as a roadmap to navigate through these 90 days that will guide her and build a more continuous growth. The PLDP will be her foundation in order to be productive in developing leadership skills and abilities. The benefits of a personal leadership development plan is that it will help Jasmine outline the steps that she intends to take in order to be a better leader. A plan that includes skills needed for improvement, responsibilities she wants to take on, and tasks that she hopes to complete. During the interview process, Jasmine has to become more of an active listener so she can better offer and receive constructive feedback to and from her team that facilitates growth, as well as be adaptive to change and growth. Jasmine needs to observe and learn how to improve her emotional intelligence because, as stated, one quoted that she was childish. Next, Jasmine should take initiative in learning more about herself, both personally and professionally, by taking some of the self-assessments to identify her core characteristics. These can be things discovering her personality traits, like if she's adventurous or observant or more impulsive. To do this, we suggest all of the assessments that Reed mentioned earlier, along with the 360-degree feedback or the Strengths Finder. Another option is to always get your group of friends, or peers, colleagues, coworkers, and family to come together and write down words to describe you. By breaking down personality traits and strengths, Jasmine will have more of an insight into her personal style and be able to better answer the who am I piece of the personal leadership development plan. That process, which will help develop self-awareness and skills to manage herself as a leader. Leaders who know their values and put their values into action across their work, who remain connected to daily interactions and the organization's purpose, can only do so once they have become more self-aware. By the end of the 60 days, Jasmine should have attended some leadership training, professional development courses that are specialized programs designed to help her learn various leadership techniques and refine any effective skills in order to run the team, including assertive communication, motivation methods, coaching, leading by example, and being a mentor. Mentoring is important for leaders because it brings the best out of the people that you are leading. Mentoring generates confidence, it inspires trust, and furthers team development. A big part of owning leadership development is determine what sort of leader you want to be. And at the end of it all, and as a continuous cycle, self-reflection in leadership means devoting time to think about yourself as a leader. And it's crucial for Jasmine's leadership development. It involves considering her current level of skills, strengths, weaknesses, behavioral patterns, and how to influence others. Effective leaders have the ability to communicate well, motivate their team, handle and delegate responsibilities, listen to feedback, and have the flexibility to solve problems in a workplace that could be ever-changing. Team members seek these skills in their candidates that they look up to in a leadership role. Next slide, please. In conclusion, to keep her current position, Jasmine has to come out of this experience as a transformational leader and transform this organization. Transformational leaders know how to encourage, inspire, and motivate employees to perform in ways that create meaningful and effective change. The result is engaged workforce that's empowered to innovate and help shape any organization's future success. Transformational leaders transform organizations, companies, teams, and individuals. And for Jasmine, that starts with being more open, personal, inclusive, decisive, and more visible. Next slide, please. Here is our reference page. Next slide, please. And thank you for your time and attention. We'll now open the floor for any questions, comments, feedback.
Okay, back to Sharice's question. I think part of the answer came right here in the 30, 60, 90. I think that's what you have to do with somebody like Sharice going forward. But the bigger question is I think of Sharice is what do you say to somebody? Well, let's remember a couple of things. People never call when things are going well. There has to be an expectation, and you have to explain when you're hired as a consultant. I'm going to tell you what I find. My job is not to be your friend or engage in confirmation bias that you're right and they're all wrong. I'm going to tell you what I find. Now, if it hurts your feelings, then you need to know that up front. But my job in discipline inquiry is to find what I find. I can't be worried about how you're going to accept it, and I can't be worried about whether you're going to follow through with the plan. My job is to tell you what I find and what will address these issues. That's your job, not to make her feel good or any of those things. Now, so I think we've addressed that. I read an article this week, and I did not copy the article because it was in a validated publication, but I'm concerned about It was a meta-analysis of cases like this in real leadership situations. And their argument is not only in the consultant role that you shouldn't do the sandwich method, is that you should not say anything positive, that you should only focus on the negative pieces. That's a little much for me. But basically they were saying, don't throw people a bone. If you do, that's all they'll focus on. And that may not be what's needed. You know, you do this really well. Well, do we really need that in this organization? I mean, is that a good thing? You know, you're a sharp dresser. Well, is that really going to help us with our goals and objectives? And so I intentionally didn't, but my reference to that is if we start worrying about outcomes, or not outcomes, if we start worrying about whether they're going to accept what we tell them or not, or if we can implement the plan, again, to be redundant, then that starts shaping, that's when our biases start to kick in. And if we're only going to say the negative things, that may be bias as well. So I worry about there might be inherent bias in the notion that we're only going to talk about the negative things. But
Dr. Lamb, can I share an image that when I was leading a district and going through difficult times when change needed to happen, I kept this image, like I had a credenza desk. So there was a side of it that only I could see unless like you got behind me. I kept this image where I could see it. Can you see the image now?
yes.
To remind me that the work is valuable. Everybody in the district wanted to get better for our students. Everybody was there because they were doing the best. Everybody wanted to improve. But nobody personally wants to change. You want everybody else to change, but nobody personally wants to change themselves when you ask for those volunteers. And then leading the change, that was my job. And it's hard. It's uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have those difficult, crucial conversations. And as the leader of the organization, I had to remind myself that this was me. It was not my job to coach and make people comfortable and worry about culture all the time. I had other people in the district, in the organization, that was their job. But at times, as a leader, a transformational leader, you have to remind yourself that this is your role, to stand up there and be the one driving the change. And it's hard and it's uncomfortable. Sometimes you feel like nobody likes you. But when you focus on the overall long-term plan, if it was well developed and based in research and based in data, at some point, you're going to be able to celebrate that with everybody. But at times, you're going to feel like this, and that's the way it has to be as the leader. Now, have those people in your organization that can coach and do the culture and do the small details. But sometimes it's just hard.
Yeah. Most of the time it's hard. Now, Dr. Burgess just hit on something that we've all got to understand. Coaching is not leadership. Let me say that again. Coaching is not leadership. That is, we think that it is, or but leaders, that's only from the positive and working with people on a personal and building personal relationships and doing those
things. It's a
things.
valuable role.
It's valuable. Absolutely, it's valuable, but it will not affect change. It won't do that. It will help people, cope and build themselves. It's a part of an overall leadership strategy, but that's not a leadership role. And that's why I was very careful this morning. You have the role of the leader of the organization, you have the consultant, and then you have the coach. You have to be careful as a consultant that you don't assume that coach role because they hired you, because that will completely contaminate or bias what you do, because that's different than being a consultant, and that's even different than being a leader. And again, everybody wants change, they don't want everybody else to change. They don't want to change themselves. They don't want to lead that change because that's who gets the slings and arrows. I worked with a Jasmine one time. He became a Jasmine. His name was John. And he came to me and said, I want to get one of these jobs. They've opened up 6 new jobs in the district. Assistant Superintendent for Quality Assurance. That's the complaint department. And so they hired 6 people. They gave them all an admin and a curriculum person. They hired 18 people. They cleared out the 3rd floor in the Ed Center, ran all the phones there. So all the complaints that came in, none of them went to the 4th floor where the leadership was. They went to the 3rd floor where the customer service department was. And after a year, he said, "This is the worst job I've ever had. I'm just so unhappy. This is terrible." And he was my friend. And I said, "John, you do realize what you do?" And he said, "These people call and complain day and night." Well, that's what you do. You're the complaint department. What do you think was going to happen there? I said, "John, it's not a leadership role. It says right. The name's right there in the title, quality assurance. It's the complaint department." I want to do leadership. Well, that's not a leadership role. That's not what that is. And he was particularly ill-suited as Jasmine is, but his was exactly the opposite of Jasmine. He cared too much. And he could not disengage. Jasmine, the way that she copes with people complaining all day, because she's in customer service, that's what people do. They complain all day. It's kind of like the lady over at the bookstore that didn't get any books. The mission's right there in the title, bookstore. You get books and sell them. And her email was, "It has not gone as well as we'd hoped." You think? The only thing could have been worse if you'd have wet your pants and burnt the building down. You got no books to sell. It has not gone well. She's totally unsuited to be in that. So now they're looking to do something different with the bookstore. Well, duh. And so the notion here is that John internalized everything, and it ate him up. Jasmine, her way to cope with people complaining is simply to disengage, make no decisions, become completely aloof, abuse the people that work under her. That's the way that she is coping personally. But again, that's not leadership. She's not really in a leadership. I mean, that's as Dr. Burge, that's just part of the organization. We need some things, but that's not that's not everything. I mean, leaders have to be more proactive than her. She can take a leadership role within her organization, within her little group, but she has abdicated that role. And that's the way that she copes. So you have to understand that when you go out and work with people, there's not always going to be anything positive, because they didn't call you because things were going well. And so you've got to understand that. And if you give them something positive, unfortunately, they only cling to that. It's kind of like the fellow that asked the lady out, and she said, "Only way I'd go out with you if you were the last man on earth." And his response was, "So you say I got a chance?" He only heard the positive piece. That was part of an article that I read this week in preparation for my thoughts of this case. Is that folks only hear the positive. That we've got to quit doing the positive. And again, I don't like that. I thought, I'm not willing to add that one to our body of work, but I get the notion here.
So can I ask you something, Dr. Lamb, really quick?
Yes.
We were looking at like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and one of the basic needs is esteem, right? So I know you're not saying this, but if you don't have like any positive, then how will that even help Jasmine say, or anybody really, get to that?
Yes, what I
So,
mean, I don't want to get into the notion that you should never do positives. If there's something positive there, you've got to find it. And it may be something that you the positive, the only positive here could be is that she asked for help. But again, that's why I said I didn't want to share that article, because it says you should never work from the positive, that they'll only cling to that part and you can't get any organizational change. And so I agree, Ben, that because if we go back to Maslow, that esteem is part of that. But again, Sean just pointed out, positive must be aligned with the purpose of the position. Again, that's what I was, in the last segment I was talking about. What's your purpose? What's your goal? And so, I'll kind of let the cat out of the bag. If I were the consultant, I usually wait till after the last presentation. If I were the consultant here, the first thing that I would say to Jasmine is this is not for you. That we can go through 1,000 different plans, 60, 30, 60, 90, we can do all, but the bottom line here, Jasmine, this is not for you. You are wholly unsuited for this. Let's talk about what you could be suited for. Let's go to the positive route here is not in this job. There's nothing positive with you in this job. You have completely disconnected because of the emotional toll that it takes on customer service takes on people. You have disengaged. This is not for you. That's what the data says. Now, we can then move to a positive with this person and build esteem or do whatever. But now I've kind of let the cat out of the bag early here. But as the consultant, what you've got to say to Jasmine is this is not for you. There is nothing that I can do or can tell you to do that is going to change the nature of this job. And these things that you are doing are your way of coping with this job. This job is not for you. That doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean that you don't have skill and ability. It doesn't mean that there's something else that you can't do. But this is not it. Somebody has to say to me, Dale, you can't be a jockey. No matter how bad you want it or how much we try or do whatever, you can't be a jockey. That's not in your future. This is not for you. I can beat you up with data, up and down and do all that, but the bottom line here is this is not for you. And so, we have to come to accommodation of that sometimes it's the fit is just not there. You're not on the right bus. Not only you're not in the right seat, you're not on the right bus. Now, I want to bring one thing up from the last presentation. If you have been a certain way and people recognize that way that you are, and then all of a sudden one day they come to work and you are completely the opposite way, do you think that they might be suspicious of your motives? That, again, back to that trust, you've got to build trust. Now, not authentic, that's exactly right. Now, if I were going to give Jasmine the 30, 60, 90 plan, the first thing that I would require her to do, or tell her that she needed to do if she wanted to be successful, is that she would have to have a communication system with her team and say, I acknowledge all these bad things in my behavior. I am going to try to fix my behavior. I could use your help in that. I acknowledge these, and I'm telling you what I'm doing. I'm not trying to be devious or deceptive or engage in practice, but again, I understand what has happened. I'm going to try to change that. I may or may not be successful, or I may not do it but the whole point here is full disclosure. You know, I'm not just, you're going to come to work one day and I'm going to be completely the opposite. You're not, I'm telling you what I'm doing. I think it's inherent in you and the consultant to make sure that you understand that you have to explain that to Jasmine, that she can't just all of a sudden start behaving differently in the workplace. That'll only compound the problems that you have now. That'll only make it worse.
Hey, Dr. Lamb.
Yes.
I was going to say, Stephen Covey, he talks about that exact point with all of his research with that speed of trust. So if somebody was interested in following up what you're talking about, that's very big in what he talks about.
Yeah. And actually, I was working in a quasi consultant role here with an automotive group locally. And one of the things that I asked them to do is to go, you know, they're doing Covey right now. And I've asked them to go extend that into Simon Sinek, which is kind of the next level past. Covey is the basic level, Reed is exactly right. And that's what we're talking about here. But you know, you go to the Simon Sinek, which is kind of like the next level up. And so that I've got them doing some reading in that, the Hendrick Automotive Group. I've got them doing some reading in that next level up of, because understanding that selling cars is trust, and it's customer service based, and that, you know, they've got to change their behaviors. They can't, there's got to be a more holistic view. And so, yeah, we're moving from Covey to Sinek right now. And so we're doing with them. And so now I'm just doing that as a personal favor. I don't charge for that. And I just act as a true consultant in that, you know, here's where you go next. And they're doing some work in that. Now they've got a corporate consultant that they're paying, but I don't do that role. I'm not in the automobile business. I'm doing that as a personal favor, more of it as a curator of where to go next, kind of thing. But again, it's that trust piece. But again, you can't just all of a sudden come in and start acting different and think that that's going to fix the past or change the future. But yeah, Reed's is right. That Covey speaks to that. And Sean pointed out authenticity. That's one of the things. And Sinek talks more about that, and he gets more into the specifics of how you do that. All right, we're ready for our last group today.
All right, can y'all hear me? All right, we're ready.
Okay, case study 4, giving feedback by Birdie, Angelique, Pastor Joe, and Chiffon. The background information that we gathered was Jasmine is the leader of a team of 11 customer service specialists. She has asked the consultant. She has asked her to help her grow and develop as a leader. Next slide. Here's the objectives that we came up with. Provide data and analysis, feedback in a constructive and neutral type manner, using the sandwich approach. Help Jasmine identify areas for improvement and offer strategies to help her improve. Also, to provide recommendations for Jasmine's leadership plan. Also, to find possible ways for Jasmine's personality to be used in positive and effective ways in her current role, or reassign her to a new role where her skills can be utilized. Next slide. Here's our quantitative data and analysis. to conduct interviews with the customer service specialist. All feedback was perceived as negative. The comment about Jasmine letting members to be involved in the decision-making process appeared to be more because she doesn't know what to do. And additionally, we to conduct an interview with Jasmine and to reflect on her prior education, her leadership roles, working experience, and professional development. And we want that to go on previous and ongoing. And also to review the organization's customer service expectations, policies, and procedures. Next slide.
So with the Jahari's window that we would use, we are hoping that Jasmine will be able to see how she is perceived by others. She will become more self-aware so that she can better develop herself. She will be able to look at her personality and see how it corresponds in a customer service setting, and hopefully build trust and respect with her team members. We know that the Jahari's window, of course, shows what is known to self, what is unknown to self, the hidden self, and what is unknown to self. So with using the Jahari's window for Jasmine, the open self will show that she includes others in decision-making processes. The blind self will show that others do know that her sarcasm hurts others and is seen as unprofessional. It lacks competency and empathy. Her hidden self, we know that there is a need for improvement because she has sought out for help. And then her unknown self, maybe she is not placed in the best position based on her skill sets. And will the changes take place that need to take place, or will she be placed in a different position? And so the evaluation of qualitative feedback from a consultant perspective, the positives, which are really, we just learned are not really positive, that she includes members in decision-making processes and seeks out professional help. She definitely needs to have the right folks on the decision-making team. The negative, she's indecisive, she lacks professionalism, she's not visible, there's no presence, has rude jokes and sarcasm, she has poor customer service skills, no trust with subordinates, and does not demonstrate competency and empathy. From a leadership perspective, the need for change is immediate, or the result could be detrimental. Jasmine is not suited for the current role that she is serving in, and it's a poor reflection of the organization and its stakeholders.
So originally we had gone for, when meeting with Jasmine, using the sandwich approach, but as we've learned today, that's not the greatest approach. And kind of reflecting on this model, we were trying to fit in some of her areas, such as her including them in the decision-making process as a positive, because our initial view was she was kind of incompetent and very indecisive, but we thought the collaboration piece could be kind of turned into a positive. But for step one, we said that her seeking out that professional development help was a positive, because she did need to be kind of told what was going well, what was not going well. And I think she thought there was areas that were good, but there, as we've seen, there's really no positives within this case study. We said that she lacked availability, just demonstrated poor professionalism, was indecisive, had an inappropriate sense of humor. And these were just things that her employees were stating, and that we all saw as negatives. Even her informing staff members of changes and processes being made, we thought that was decent, but she still was still indecisive in this area. And kind of looked for her employees to make decisions, which was not good as a leader in her position. Lastly, we stated that she would need leadership professional development opportunities and to be paired with a veteran leader who could mentor her if they were going to try to give her time to change in this current role. The central problem was that Jasmine seems to lack various leadership skills that are necessary to succeed in the field of customer service. This was very obvious. She doesn't seem to fit that current role, but maybe they could use her disposition in another area where that could be more useful. I still think she would need to make some more changes moving forward, and I think that this feedback would be useful for her in the future. Then we stated if this isn't fixed soon, it could be very detrimental to the organization. They could have a loss of employees and customers because we're assuming if she's treating her employees like this, there's no telling how she's treating the customers. So we would expect a loss in both of those areas. The secondary problem or problems that we listed was that Jasmine has a difficulty accepting constructive criticism and negative feedback. It's pretty clear that she lacks a growth mindset, and this would need to be adjusted. Her lack of availability was discussed. Physically, she's not in the building where she could help her employees or the customers. And even virtually, whether it was by phone or email, it seems like she's kind of hard to get in contact with. And as a leader, you need to have your presence there, and they need to be able to reach you in those times of need, especially during those working hours. So we stated that as another problem. She's too indecisive, can't make decisions for herself or for the betterment of the organization, and she looks to the employees too much, including them in some decision-making processes. Would be good, but she does it too much and she's not able to make good decisions. So we stated that as another problem. She lacks professionalism. She inappropriately jokes with them and uses sarcasm. And that just brings down morale, and sarcasm isn't needed in the role of customer service. Lastly, the employees do not trust or respect Jasmine. And this was clearly outlined in the feedback that we received. Our areas for concern, leaders should be reflective of the organization's mission and vision, and they should model the type of behaviors that they expect to see in others. Jasmine is definitely lacking in this area, and she's poorly representing the organization and its stakeholders. Without immediate change, there could be a loss of the customers, as mentioned previously, and it could result in high turnover rates or loss of employees who may be really good employees that you would want to keep, but without, a good leader in that position, that would be the trend that we would start to see, if not already occurring. Employees will become burnt out and won't perform at their best due to the poor leadership. They're going to be burnt out, and if they're not seeing a good leader kind of show or exhibit the qualities that they want to see, those employees aren't going to be encouraged to go and do the same. Even your best people get burnt out at that point because that's a toxic working condition. So that would need to be changed. And lastly, Jasmine's going to need to be receptive of feedback and recommendations if some type of change is going to occur, and hopefully a positive change. But we have stated if no change occurs, the leadership team would want to transition her to a new role and seek a new leader for that position.
Okay, as consultants, we felt we should first suggest that Jasmine be given a chance to improve her disposition and her skills as a customer service representative and a servant leader. So mainly 2 items for Jasmine to try are: first, trying to find a professional development seminars, courses to take, with the expense could be 50-50 or her expense. 2, she could pair with a mentor who could shadow her, give support, guidance, as well as critical feedback geared toward her improvement. In the immediate category, we felt that the workers needed to know her on-site hours and her contact information when she's not on site, especially for critical decision-making concerning customer service. During that time, a third recommendation is to have a weekly evaluation meeting that monitor and assess her progress. We're hoping that since she is willing to call on a consultant to help her improve, that she will be willing to take further steps as well. Perhaps bi-weekly meetings if she shows improvements. We're estimating to give her approximately 3 to 6 months to make significant improvement. We have suggested that her team building skills need to improve as well. Recommended monthly exercises and activities with her team so she can provide feedback to help her improve or lack thereof. In the next slide, we will discuss the change theory and alternate recommendations. Kurt Lewin developed a very practical and simple change method, the 3-step method. The model refers to as unfreeze, change, and refreeze. The idea is to shift the balance of forces that are working against each other to making changes and then redirecting them to a balance in the direction of desired change that benefits the person, the organization, the stakeholders, and its customers. So for unfreezing, it helps to overcome the strain of individual resistance, in this case, Jasmine, who doesn't take criticism well, and the strain of group conformity, such as the team does the same things they always did. The activities in unfreezing, you have to motivate Jasmine and her 11 specialists by preparing them for a change. In this instance, Jasmine realizing that her leadership development problem and was asking for help. 2, build trust and recognition for the need for the change. Here it was already done by anonymous interviews with her specialists showing a real need for change. Actively participating in recognizing the problems and begin brainstorming for solutions. The consultant brings feedback back to Jasmine with concerns of her disposition and her skill set, then asking for brainstorming solutions from Jasmine, her team, and possibly upper management. Changing behavior by movement. Realizing this disposition may not be in Jasmine's skill set. That is agreed upon by Jasmine team and possibly upper management. Realizing her insecurity in making decisions at various levels, yet may have the skills to be a good team leader, just not in a leadership management role. We have 4 suggestions in addition to the prior recommendations. Provide Jasmine with the opportunity to make changes as previously recommended. Jasmine may have to accept a lower position in the company, definitely not in customer service. If it is not accepted by management or Jasmine, then termination may be the way to go. Upper management needs to revamp hiring process for leadership roles. That includes both skill set and disposition. It would be wise to include various personality and leadership tests, such as Maxwell's DISC personality indicator, which has a $25 fee. We suggest that the applicant to pay the fee. Clifton strength assessments are free for both hiring and promoting within. As to where to place Jasmine according to her disposition or skill set can be applied. Then implement the changes as it benefits the organization, stakeholders, Jasmine, the team, and the customers. We feel that either way, a change in leadership is definitely necessary to discourage employee turnover and to satisfy customers to be repeat customers. Refreezing takes place once the changes have been made and is sustainable to balance both the driving and resisting forces. While making the change permanent, we would recommend periodic monitoring and evaluation, perhaps quarterly. Next slide. These are our references. And next slide. Feedback and any questions? Thank you for your time. And I'd like to add something else. I was both in Jasmine's position and the specialist position. So it resonated with me that I was not a customer service leader, but a good participant, and got transferred to a warehouse distribution. So I felt it.
Thank you for that. All right, some concluding thoughts on this presentation, excellent presentation in this case, things to think about here. Because people know better doesn't mean they'll do better. You have to understand that as a leader and as a consultant. that just because people know better does not mean that they will do better. And what that means is, you know, we can tell folks, but we can't be, as a consultant, we can't be tied to whether they'll do it or not. As a leader, we have to be tied to whether they do it or not. And so our role changes, and our actions have to change when we change from the consultant role to the leader role. And so as a consultant, we give Jasmine I hesitate to say the benefit of the doubt, but we give her constructive steps to take to try to get better. That's what our job is as a consultant. But from the leadership perspective, we know that just because people know better doesn't mean that we're going to do better. So we'll talk in a minute about what we would have to do differently as a leader. But again, back to the notion, people don't call us when things go well. But a lot of times what they're wanting is confirmation that I'm doing the right things. If I just increase the intensity or the duration, that things will eventually turn around and get better. That's not always true, folks. If you're not doing the right things, just doing more of them won't get you where you need to be. But people have a resistance to change because they're certain. Back to Monty Hall, I'm certain that I'm right. If I'll just stay the course, it'll eventually correct. No, that's not true either. And this notion that if we had it right and we changed, we're so afraid of that. We're afraid that you know, if we just stayed the course longer, just did it longer, more intensity. You know, I gave Sean 3 gallons of water, he'll eventually fly, because I see correlations that aren't there, like heat, ice cream, and crime. I believe that anecdotal, that's not really data, because I saw birds drinking water. I think if I just keep on giving Sean enough water, he'll eventually fly. No, he won't. And we just keep going the wrong direction. We hit it 20 yards further than in the woods, and we did our old driver. All of these analogies and metaphors that I've used this semester. But if we're going the wrong direction, no amount of duration intensity will get us to where we need to be. So those are some of the things that we've got to remember. We've got to have a plan, but it's got to be working. Now, some thoughts. In qualitative work, we don't predetermine categories. They emerge from the data. So we can't say we're going to have some positive, we're going to have some negative. No, we find what we find. We do not a priori up front predetermine the categories that we're looking for. The categories emerge. Sandwich method. I had an article. I've got it pulled up. I'm not bothered to show it to you. I had an article. The sandwich method is buries the lead. Often hides what we're trying to do. We got to start getting away from that. Consultants and leaders have to get away from that. Coaches can do that. Absolutely, coaches ought to do that. But not consultants, and definitely not leaders.
Dr. Lamb.
Yes.
Are we outliers in the fact that all of us kind of kept our leadership hats on or coaching hats on and went that direction with this group, or is that typically what you see in this?
Every time.
Okay, just want to make sure we weren't.
No, that's why I said y'all are good people. That's your problem. You're too good. You're
and
too
hopefully
kind.
good leaders are grounded in wanting to do good by the people they lead. So that is the comfort area.
Yeah.
But effective leaders can't live there all the time, because they're not going to be the transformational leaders that we aspire to be. You have to clearly define your purpose and the role that you need to play, so that you will be that courageous leader when you need to be and have those crucial conversations. Because if the leader doesn't, then no one else in the organization will. And you're not going to be able to impart the change, lead the change that is necessary.
Yeah. And, one of the things that we'll get, just one second, Joe. One of the things that we talk to you about a lot in school leadership is about changing your lens and understanding that you can't see you can't be a champion for teachers. You have to be a champion for kids. And that causes uncomfortable conversations and critical conversations. Again, back to the leader, you're trying to you're trying to change the outcomes of the organization. And again, y'all are too good. Y'all are trying to go from a leadership coaching perspective here, where you're trying to be kind. You can't live there all the time. You have to make some command decisions. Joe, you had a question or a comment?
Did my past experience put a biased spin on this, or did it help?
It always does. We call that anecdotal. It's not data. We bring that with us. We have to be careful of that.
Okay, did it help or not?
Depends how you use it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, you can be, it helps you be empathetic, but you don't want to be too empathetic to where you're being counter to the organization just because you're projecting your personal experiences into it. So it's all depend. I mean, we all bring our previous experiences to the conversations, for better or worse. We just need to be aware of them,
recognize,
and how we're using them,
Yes.
Because my first reactions, it was Jasmine's got to go.
Yeah.
That was my first reaction.
Well, that, you know, as a leader, that would be mine. But as the role of consultant, my job is to help her. But helping her is not coaching her, not just telling her, you know, everything's peachy. We have to have critical conversations with people, or as Ron Thompson used to say, come to Jesus meetings.
Yeah.
That's kind of what we have to do in the consultant role. We're not a coach, but in the leader, I said, I'm going to conclude with, you know, as the leader, I've got that down as some things here at the end here as a leader. But back to the case, some points again to bring out: decision making. Volunteerism is not decision making when you ask for volunteers for everything. If we go back to Six Sigma, which is a process for improvement usually in sometimes it's mostly in manufacturing environments, but it can be in other environments too. Six Sigma says is that you go to the point of contact, and that's the person that you want involved in the decision making. You identify who you need to have for this particular role. The role here was, you know, system redesign. We can't take volunteers for that. That's not a positive. We need to identify the people that we want. That's part of being the leader here. Basically, using volunteerism for everything is an abdication of your leadership role. You're not getting the best people making decisions. Now, if you're doing the company picnic, volunteers are okay. Who's going to bring the potato salad? But if you're trying to redesign your system, or if you're working on, you know, in a leadership capacity, volunteerism is not part of leadership. I mean, using that as your decision-making strategy. You've got to find your best people, or the most appropriate people. All right. I think they call those key players or principles in the Six Sigma model. So let's shift our hat here. I've got my eye on our time. Let's shift our hat here to the role of the leader. To Joe's point, if you're the leader, Jasmine has to go. You know, you're looking at turnover. Obviously, you're looking at market share, and you're looking at lawsuits from her behaviors. Nothing good is, you know, Jasmine has to go. The question is not does Jasmine have to go for the leader? The question is does she have to go out of this department, or does she have to go off the bus? Back to the Collins metaphor. Did we need to change her seat, or do we need to change her bus? That she can't be on our bus? That's the question as a leader for Jasmine. Now, understanding, I've been involved in a lot of things in my life, and one of the things that the school districts get accused of is passing the trash. Is this person was wholly unsuccessful in this role, but we found them a role over here. Organizations that do that, or, that, I guess that's humanistic. We're trying to look out for folks. But organizations that do that run the risk of alienating the people that are in the organization, that are doing their job, are fulfilling their role, are doing what needs to be done. Those are the people that we do not want to alienate, because they're the people that are, again, metaphorically, that are pulling our wagon. And so you have to ask yourself, if I put her somewhere else in the organization, what will happen there? Will it just be, now I've got another group that's angry? And so the question for you as the leader is not, do I move Jasmine out of there, but do I keep Jasmine? Is there some other place in the organization that I can find for her? And my argument to you this morning is no. That people, Jasmine needs a fresh start somewhere else, whether she'll take, the constructive criticism and these professional development plans and put them in place or not is up to her. But for me as a leader in the organization, I can't keep Jasmine because she has the bad will that she has generated. If I just move her somewhere else, then people will accuse me of passing the trash, and that's exactly what I'm doing. The culture of the organization has to be that we can't allow people here that abuse other folks. I mean, again, it comes down to what your value system, what you believe in. In the school business, you can't abuse kids. If you do that, you can't stay with us. And in a situation like this, in an organization where you have somebody who's in charge of 11 other people, they can't abuse those people. We can't, the retention issues, the customer service, the losing the clients, the lawsuits, fill in the blank here. I think the part that tips the scale for me is the sarcasm deal, the bullying. That's just too far for me. Now it may not be too far for you. I had a student write a reflection recently in my law class, and they said, well, I would keep this teacher. If she did something excessive, I'd let her go. And I had to point out, outside of physical or sexual abuse, what this teacher did was the most excessive thing, a punitive thing that you could do to a child. She failed him for a whole year over a homework assignment. Made it count more than half the yearly grade and failed a kid for the whole year over a homework assignment. What more excessive than that's the most you can do to a child in public school is exclude them for a year. That's the most punishment you can give. They can bring a gun and not even get that much punishment, as long as they don't shoot somebody with it. And she did that over a homework assignment. Well, what would your definition of excessive be? If this is not excessive, what would your definition of excessive be? I mean, did they have to actually sexually or physically assault a kid? Yeah, those are easy ones. Yeah, the law says they got to go if they do that. But what is your value system as a leader? Is what we're trying to get at here. And that's kind of the heart of this case from a leadership perspective is what will you allow or what will you put up with? Ben, you've got a question?
Yeah, well, I know that this might be opinion, and I hope it doesn't come across as bad, but I noticed that at my particular community college, now some of you all out there who work might see this as well, but I know we've been really trying to do this whole inclusiveness and trying to give extensions, but sometimes students may or may not do well. And there has been a few of my coworkers that have said, oh, well, we're going to pass these students on or make some assignments more just so they can look like they're successful. So, I mean, I just kind of wonder, like, okay, I understand your story, but could it be that there's like some teachers that are in the, thought like, oh, I don't know if No Child Left Behind is brought this part. I mean, this is just some thoughts I want to bring out to you, just because it's been something I have been wanting to ask over the past couple classes.
Well, those people are not helping kids, they're helping themselves. Because
Right.
the whole idea, and Sean's giggling, the whole idea is intervention. The whole idea of No Child Left Behind is not about children, it's about the faculty. It's about you got to go out and reach and work with these people. Well, I don't want to do that. It just, and so the folks that just pass kids on, they're not doing that for the kid. They're doing it so that they don't have to work and actually be involved in the interventions for these children and add more to what they're and take the responsibility to make sure that what they're doing is actually a treatment.
I'd be interested in looking at the class curriculum and if it was rigorous or not, or if they were actually following through with the data.
Yeah, and that's the thing, because we can't apply the same level of accountability to students as we do adults. Adults are being paid for a job. Students are what we are working to increase their achievement. So we have to have a completely different lens and evaluation of the two. If the problem is that students are being passed along, we don't need to focus on what the students are doing as the problem. We need to look at the systems around the student. What is the curriculum? What are the expectations? What's the classroom environment? What's the culture? And how do we help the adults in that build that system, from the classroom teacher to the assistant principal, leadership, alignment of resources, transportation, all those things, to make that system best so that that doesn't happen on either end of the continuum. Because sometimes classroom teachers, when you're in that four walls, it's easy to look at the students as being the problem in that situation. If it's a ongoing situation affecting multiple students, we need to zoom out at the broader system to look for improvements.
And can I say something here too?
Sure.
Just because I work at a community college, I think sometimes too, we fail the student because not everybody is going to be able to pass certain higher education courses. And I'm going to self-disclose here. For example, my husband was trying to take Calculus 3. He tried to take it 3 times. He changed his major when he was getting his undergraduate degree from physics to chemistry because he could not pass Calculus 3. And you had to have a C or better in Calculus 3 to get a physics degree. And so not everybody at the college level is going to be able to take certain courses. So I feel like that faculty member that just wants to pass that student along, they're hurting the student because they're giving them a false hope that because the classes sometimes build, and you're hurting. The only thing you're really doing is helping your graduation rate, and I don't know. So you're helping the institution, but the institution's goal is to help students. So I feel like you're being detrimental to everybody. You're undermining the ultimate goal of the college, in my opinion.
But you really need to zoom out as a leader to see where that root cause is. If you have a math 3, that high level math course instructor that is failing 50% of the students, is it because truly 50% of them are not meant to have a master's in physics, or is it that the prerequisite courses are not teaching what they need to teach to get kids there? Is it that the acceptance rates, like we're not accepting the right kids? So if it's an isolated incident here and there, that's to be expected, and that's good for the system. But if it's too many, too often, too frequently, too isolated to a specific adult, that's where we need to look at the broader system to see where the pain point is, so we can make the right tweak to improve the system.
Yes, I agree. I misunderstood. I thought Ben was saying basically, pass along one individual here and there, but I agree, Dr. Burgess, that, there's an overall bigger picture, but I feel like sometimes we have a tendency, especially, in all areas of education, K-12 and higher ed, to just pass the student along when we're really doing more harm than good.
Right. I mean, that's true. it was just something that kind of brought my mind with what Dr. Lamb said, because I was like, well, that's illegal, which I could see that being illegal. It just seemed very interesting because I never thought of it as being illegal, but I get where you guys are talking about coming from.
Yeah, and so in the end, the hardest thing in education is it the system or is it the student? Do we have all the right things in place? Are they doing all the things that they need to do? We need to look at it from a system perspective, the process that we're putting students through. One of the things that we do is at the college level is we look at D's, W's, and F's. That's the letter grade D, withdrawals, and then failing grades. And one of the arguments is that when in courses where those are high is that we're just taking the wrong students. But there's a social contract here. If we take you, that means that you can do the level of work that is required, and that we're just not teaching you. That's really what's going on. And so it's inherent to go and look. It's just like when you have a litter of kittens, you just have to raise their tail and look. You just got to go look. And so one of the things that I do around here, at the college, I just go and look. And I can tell you, the teaching is abysmal. It's awful. To call it teaching is being generous. Now, what are you going to do about that? At the university level, what are you going to do? Well, there is no teaching evaluation system at Gardner-Webb. It boggles my mind that we don't have any kind of a teaching evaluation. Nobody ever comes to your room and evaluates your teaching. And then we wonder why teaching isn't any good. Well, we don't evaluate it, we don't assess it, we don't try to help people get any better. A couple years back, they asked a few of us, and we went out and did an audit. And 30% of the classes didn't even meet; they weren't even there. Of course, the undergraduate faculty revolted. Oh, they were just so mad they wanted to fight. Wanted the data destroyed. What was our methodology? I said, well, now stay with me here. This is real high level. I went to the room and I looked. If there was somebody in there, I put a check in the box. If there wasn't anybody in the room, I put an X in the box. That was the methodology. I didn't assess how well you were teaching. I just assessed whether you were teaching or not. Well, you can't do that. That violates shared governance, that you actually expect us to meet our classes. We're not even talking about what you did if you were there. We're talking about you weren't even there. 30% of the classes don't meet, but we're not having classes. And so right now, the trick is that the faculty is offering up a peer review process because we're getting a new provost Monday. Actually, 2 days from now, we're getting a new provost, and they're afraid that she's going to put in some kind of a teacher evaluation system. And so what they're trying to do is kind of like we were talking about NCAA basketball this morning. So what basketball programs especially, and even football programs will do is we'll sanction ourselves so that NCAA won't. And so what they're basically saying is we'll do a peer evaluation system if you won't start evaluating us. Well, how would you have any confidence in the peer evaluation system? Well, of course not. And so the reason why D's, W's, and F's are so high on the undergraduate side at Gardner-Webb is we don't evaluate teaching. We don't know if it's good or bad. I do because I went and looked. It's bad. When it occurs, the only, actually with some of the classes I've seen that not having class would have been preferable to having class. And so when this all came up a couple years back, the administration's response to poor teaching was to change the furniture in the classrooms. I'm not making that up. I've got a picture of it on my phone. They changed because they said, we're having all these classes they're fairly small, but they're just lecturing to us. It's just terrible. So they changed the furniture. They bought some of those little triangular desks where you like, and put them in little groups in the room, and they're kind of shaped like this, but they're cut out for people like me for your belly, but they're kind of in a triangle. So when you put 4 of them together, it makes a little pot. They changed the furniture in the room. And so now you go by the room and there's 7 students in there, and they're sitting in 2 little clusters, and the instructor is still standing in the corner behind the podium lecturing. It didn't change anything, but that was the response, was we'll just change the furniture in the room. Instead of putting students in rows and the person standing in the corner lecturing, we'll do that. We'll change the furniture. We'll do anything but address the real problem. And so now we've stopped, we've stopped asking students. That's the next level we were trying to do instructional improvement, and we changed the furniture. That didn't help. So we've stopped doing that survey now. We don't want to know how bad it is. And so now the numbers of D's, W's, and F have escalated even higher, and we're still not willing to address the problem that folks can't teach or won't teach. And it doesn't matter their intent, whether they can't teach or won't teach, the outcome is the same. I was thinking about, where's Reed on my screen here? Where's Reed? There's Reed down at the bottom. I was thinking about Reed in his line of work. This is an awful thing to say, but in Reed's line of work, it doesn't matter if somebody was shooting at Ben and hits me. I'm still dead. It doesn't matter what their intent is. The trick is, don't be shooting at people. That's the thing here, is it doesn't matter if we can't teach or don't teach. What matters is we're not teaching. To get the metaphor here, to get the analogy here, is that we've got to be teaching kids if we want them to learn something. It doesn't matter whether we're just not willing or not able. In the end, they're not getting what they need. It's our duty to find out as leaders why they're not getting what they need, and to try to fix that. And again, we got to collect data, both qualitative and quantitative, and we've got to be honest about it. We can't go in with preconceived notions, or we can't go in with bias, or we can't go in and say, well, I'm going to find some good things to say. And we go find what we find. And again, intent, we can't know what's in people's hearts. We can only see what's happening. I can only look at at the DW and F rate in some classes and say it's not happening. Whether the instructor's just bad or is not doing it, it doesn't matter. It's not happening. It doesn't matter whether Ben meant to shoot me or not. It's he was shooting at somebody else or somebody was shooting at him. Doesn't matter. If I'm the one that gets killed in this, I'm still dead. And so I think Dr. Burgess pointed that out earlier this morning. We can't know the intent on this stuff. We can only see the action, and we can't assume why people are doing what they do or don't do. We have to take action on what they do or don't do. I want to spend another, I know it's break time, but I'm going to let you go early today. I want to spend just a few minutes here. I want to review, again, I have done lesson plans for the qualitative for you. I want to review the main of those, and I'll be done here in just a minute. It will not take us long. This is the art that I was talking about this morning, how to make feedback 37% more effective. The sandwich method does not work. This is an actual real article, and it has data, and it was done at Stanford University. This is not a fly-by-night bunch. So that's what I was referring to earlier this morning. Let me close that. All right, so I'm gonna kind of work backwards here. Validity and reliability. Again, we have to have validity and reliability and ethical behavior when we're doing qualitative work. We triangulate our data, adequate engagement in data collection, our flexibility, reflexibility, our peer examination, or peer reliability and consistency and audit trail, you know, all those things. And so the ethical consideration, and right here's the ethical checklist for doing qualitative work. And this one right here, we do this, and those of you who have already done Qualtrics, you know, we do informed consent. We make sure that everybody understands what we're doing and why we're doing it. But again, data analysis, you know, findings. But the big thing is we have to make sure that we are valid and reliable in our data, in our qualitative data collection, just like we are our quantitative. That we ask the same questions. That's, you know, that the questions measure what they're intending to ask, and that we ask or to measure when we're talking to people, and that we're reliable in what we do in terms of, you know, we do it the same way every time. We talked about reliability earlier this morning, but we can't get away from those. Making sure.
Okay, well, it's quite.
And this one is back to what I have harped on all morning. When we start, after we collect the data, then we start sorting our data into categories after, not before. We don't say we're going to find something positive. We do that after. This is after. This is during the analysis part, not in the collection. This is how to analyze data. Again, these are all in your shell. You can read these, but this is the one I wanted to make sure that you understand, that this is in the analytics phase, not the collection phase. We do not determine our categories up front. We construct them after we collect our data, not before. That's a big, that's the most important thing in qualitative data. Let me say that again. The most important thing in qualitative data, after you get your reliability and your validity, you know you're doing things the right way and using the right questions and doing them the same, is making sure that we do not construct our categories before we start, because then it's confirmation. We're just looking for, we go out and we're finding what we're looking for, and that's not what we do at all in qualitative. We find what we find. So we have to make sure that it's not a minor point. That's the most thing. Again, when we're doing documents and artifacts, we have to consider the source. We have to know what their political bent or their political stance is. We can't just go out and just take things for face value. Just like I mentioned, that study that I just showed you was a empirical study from Stanford University. It's been professionally reviewed. Their data, it is objective truth. It is not somebody's political opinion. And so that's one of the things when we're looking at documents, when we're doing data mining documents and artifacts, that we're not gathering data from political sites or contaminated sites or sites with an agenda. We have to make sure that that's not what we're doing, one way or the other.
What was your question? I apologize. Can you repeat that, Dr. Lamb?
Oh, on the last one, we have to make sure of the veracity of the sites that we're collecting when we're doing, you know, qualitative is interviews, observations, and documents. When we're doing document review, we have to make sure we go to sites that are like professional journals or have been refereed. We can't go to political sites or sites that have an agenda. that have written it or are using anecdotal or throw numbers out anecdotally like it's research based. Just like that last article I pulled up said 37%. That's not based on their opinion. That's based on a meta-analysis over 200 cases where they pull data from that says that doing the sandwich method is 37% less effective than not doing the sandwich method. But that was a research, a meta-analysis from Stanford University, and that the source of that was a professional journal, not some political propaganda machine. We have to be careful, and when I say this, either way, if you watch this TV show, this has a liberal bias. If you watch this one, they have a conservative bias, and they slant everything that way, and they throw numbers around based on what they want you to believe, not based on actual research. So you have to be very careful as a consumer of qualitative documents to make sure it's more important who it came from than what it says. You have to understand that. You want people who come from a neutral or an academic perspective, rather than this is my political bent, and this is my argument, that I have cherry picked this data to make my argument. Chapter 6, we've already talked about this, being a careful observer. That was our last case study. We know that we've got to be an observer, not just taking notes. We've got to be careful in that, that everything has the physical setting, the participants, that there's more to interviewing than just listening to answers. There's a perceiving part, and all of it matters when you're collecting qualitative data. Conducting effective interviews, we know that our questions have to be valid in that they measure what we want them to. We know that doing focus groups and bimodal populations is not good. You either get the end of the curve that where everybody believes the same thing, or we get from either end of the curves, the humps, and it's just a fist fight. And so we know that there are certain things that we have to do to make sure our interviews are effective. Our questions have to measure what we intend for them to measure. We don't go hours and hours and hours. They're brief. We ask everybody the same questions. We record so that we can observe what's going on during the interview. We can look at the people. We know the types of interviews to do. Focus groups, are a good thing if we know the composition, and we don't do that in a bimodal population. Bimodal means instead of having one smooth, normal bell-shaped curve, we have two humps. People are on either end. They're radicalized to be on either end, and there's nothing in the middle. We don't do focus groups with them. That never works out well. Designing your study. Again, we start with a theoretical framework. Back to the notion that purists say that qualitative and quantitative shouldn't be done. That's in theoretical studies. In action research, it is a best practice to make sure that you compare your data, your qualitative and your quantitative. We know that we're doing action research rather than theoretical. So mixed methodology is the way to go. When you're doing action research, it is the desired methodology. Mixed methods, and that's what this is, talks about how it works. We know that there's 3 different types, and you will have to identify this when you do your final presentation where you're doing convergent. You collect quantitative and qualitative separately, and you compare them to make sure they match. We've done a case study on that. Explanatory, the quantitative is collected first, and then that gives us the notion of what questions we should ask when we do our qualitative. And then we have exploratory, where the qualitative, we collect it first, and from there we build our survey with it. Those are the designs that we do. Those are the only 3 that there are in mixed methodology. We collect both and compare them. We collect quantitative, and then that helps us with the survey, and then that helps us with our interviews. Or we do interviews and we know how to build our survey from that. Those are our three. That's our three methodologies. You have to pick one of the three, and you have to be consistent in that. All right, and then this is, of course, what is qualitative. Qualitative, of course, is interviews, observations, and data. And then, and this tells us what the basic types of qualitative are: phenomenology, ethnography, grounded theory, narrative inquiry, case studies. And basically, this is narrative inquiry is generally what we use. Because this is most linked to action research. We do narrative inquiry. Okay, looking at our schedule. Next time we'll get to Royce, which is how to put all this together and do program evaluations. Then we'll talk about super crunchers and keeping up with the quants. We'll have an Easter break. Now, this day right here, I wanted to give you from April 2nd to April 30th to put your final projects together. I am available day and night, you know that, to help you with those. That gives you a month. Now, let's talk about this section right here, April 23rd. If you're already using Qualtrics, and a couple of you like Leslie and Reed, if you've already done that, this will be an optional session for you. If you don't want to come to this, that's fine with me. But I am going to spend a formal session. This again is an optional session on this Saturday. If you want to know how Qualtrics works. If you don't come, you will not hurt my feelings. If you want to come, that will be fine. And we will spend a Saturday on how to use Qualtrics, the actual how-to. And some of you, if you want me to build, we can build your survey in front of everybody, or we can show you how to collaborate and distribute. I'll show you how Qualtrics works that day. But again, this is an optional session for you. So going forward from here, we will meet again in 2 weeks to finish up the actual content of the course with program evaluation and our outside reading. We'll have an Easter break, and then we would normally meet 2 weeks after that for this session. We're not because of Easter. This is an optional session, and then you have all that time that you can come to Qualtrics. You can learn about survey. We can Zoom. We can do whatever. But on Saturday, April 30th, you got to be ready to roll. You've got to have, your proposal. Let's go back to that. And this is what that proposal will have in it. Let me see. It's kicked me out of Blackboard this morning. Let's see if I can go back. Yeah, there we go. Please remember, here are the things that need to be in your PowerPoint proposal. Right here, your introduction. What is the problem I'm seeking to address, and why is it important? This is in the business known as the hook. What is my hypothesis and/or research questions? What am I seeking data to? What questions am I seeking to answer with data? And then you do your lit review, your theoretical framework, you pick one, then, you do a little literature review on the actual problem itself, and then a literature review on potential solutions to other people who've had this problem, what they've done. Your methodology, again, convergent, explanatory, and I will, in some cases, if you want to do exploratory, that's fine. We don't do a lot of that, but that's okay. And then what you're going to do on your quantitative and qualitative, collect your data. Now, on findings and recommendations, action plan, project deliverables, you do not have to have anything for these. You do not have to have anything for them, but you need to have a slide that said that's where I'm going to go next. But you don't have to fill these in yet because you haven't collected anything. If you have collected something, you can go ahead and put that in. But the expectation is you will go through 3. If you've got 4 and 5, that's fine if you've collected data. All right, questions you have for me? Everybody knows where we are and what we're doing?
You said we don't have to have the recommendations.
Oh, you'll have those in your final defense.
For this presentation.
I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
Okay.
No, recommendations, findings, recommendations, action plan going forward. That's for your final.
Oh, I said okay.
That's for your final.
I said
okay. Thank you. All right, other questions? Anybody?
Dr. Lamb, I had a question. So I've been working in Qualtrics, and I've sort of come up with the, working with the survey. So once we do that, that's when we can contact you and have you look at it, because we can't. Was it publish it?
You can't distribute it. It won't let you publish and distribute it until I have okayed it. You have to collaborate it to me.
Okay.
It doesn't say share, it says collaborate. You have to collaborate it to me.
All right, thanks.
Yep, but that's where you are. All right. Okay.
Yeah,
Dr. Burgess, I'll let you close us out today with final thoughts on qualitative.
All right, I think we learned some of the pitfalls and benefits as well.
Hold 1 second. I'm sorry. I'm going to mute everybody. We're getting a lot of feedback.
I'm still getting the feedback. Where's that coming from though? Do you still hear the feedback?
I think it's repeating what Dr. Lamb said.
It's coming from, okay. It's showing Angelique, but she's muted.
So weird. All right, well then I'll just keep it short and sweet. Use qualitative data, use it thoughtfully and carefully. Definitely colleagues to kind of check your biases and bounce ideas off each other before the conclusions. And if you're not reading, you're not leading. Make sure you keep reading these professional books and journals. Encourage those around you to do so as well. And I think that's all I had to say.
All right, we will see you again in 2 weeks. Everybody have a good
weekend.
Bye-bye.